Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're ready, I think we'll kick off. So on behalf of Dublin City University and the Irish Institute of Digital Business, I want to welcome you here to our workshop on Elephants Can't Dance. The topic of corporate innovation is a fascinating one. And it's an area receiving more and more attention, both from practitioners and researchers. 84% of CEOs see this as their most pressing problem, but only 6% believe that they've cracked it. And this is a wicked problem, how to be operationally excellent and still have your radar and antennae primed for entrepreneurial opportunities. Interestingly, books on the topic seem to be, they dramatize the problem with vivid analogies, such as teaching giants to dance or teaching elephants to dance. And somehow, knowing the problems of this area, they don't seem too inappropriate. And when we look at R&D investment in innovation, we see that, in fact, there is no linear correlation between R&D investment and success. And that tells us something else about the difficulty of this area, that success can't just be bought. You can't simply throw money at this. It needs a high level of ingenuity, of creativity, and of strategy. I used to be in this area myself as global head of innovation excellence for GlaxoSmithKline. And the pharmaceutical area is a particularly acute example of this, where with the patent cliff, they really have to innovate or die. And you can see that, well, I loved working in it so much that I quickly scarpered off to do a PhD so that I could stand behind a lectern here, the safety of a university lecture room, and talk about it, and think about it, and research about it, and write about it, and lecture about it. Anything but actually do it. So that's why I'm so excited about today, because we have a stellar lineup of accomplished, experienced, and really passionate people. And innovation is a lonely journey for people. So I think when you see these people, bear in mind that if corporate culture is the way we do things around here, then each of these innovators has to cut across and intersect with corporate culture. And they have to maintain a hugely positive energy despite all the difficulties and barriers they face. So we've got a really great lineup of speakers, 7 speakers in all. And when you think about it, the way we sort of arranged it is that we have a number of speakers who represent national organizations delivering innovation at a national level. And then we have a couple of speakers who operate at a regional level. And then we have a few speakers who are working at a global level. So there's going to be a wealth of wisdom shared here. And I can't wait to hear their insights. So let's get innovative. Now, I have spoken to the speakers this morning. Some of you who get a taste for what we do this afternoon will be pleased to know that we're starting a mini-series called Innovators Island. It'll be on the summer of next year. We just have a few small matters of makeup. But so the speakers are happy for you to ask them a couple of questions during the course of their talk, if you wish. They will be speaking for 15 minutes each, and they'll be kind of guillotined, but in a kind way, at 15 minutes. And we'll have a break at 3:15, and then we will come back for a couple of other speakers, and then we'll have a panel session where if you were dying to ask something, you can ask it then. So I'm delighted to, there's some things very exciting happening in Irish life in the Exo Hub, and I'm delighted to confirm that we have one of the leaders of that initiative here, Aidan O'Neill, but bear with us while we have to transfer several microphones to him. But welcome aboard.
Well, let's speak until I get mic'd up.
Anything you say. The wallet's the first thing to go, then. Sorry, Katie.
Here's one.
Cheers.
Testing, testing. Okay. Great stuff. Excellent. So, sorry, Aidan O'Neill is my name, the head of engineering for our XO Hub. This is the Irish Life Innovation Centre. I suppose first thing to say is, like, Irish Life, it's an insurance company. We don't see ourselves as a hugely innovative industry, and certainly whilst Irish Life probably has been a market-leading insurance provider in Ireland over many years, the concept of innovation is relatively new to us, although I would say we've probably innovative without knowing that we were that, so that the title has come in the last while. We've set up our innovation hub in the last sort of 2 years, and just to explain what XO means. So when we talk about innovation and we talk about our XO hub, XO stands for exponential. So what we are looking for is things that drive exponential growth. So we're not trying to be incremental. We feel that that's the job of the organisation, the broader organisation. There's plenty of room for innovation across the organisation. The Innovation Hub's job is to drive disruption, to drive changes that are going to really change the dial by a factor of 10 or 100 here, and look for those opportunities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. There's a very long slide. So why are we doing what we're doing? So I think what we realised is we are the biggest insurance provider in Ireland, but that doesn't mean that we're the fastest at doing things. And certainly now the feeling is that being big won't protect you anymore. It's fast that will beat the competition now. So we need to be faster. Yes, we want to leverage the size that we have in the Irish market, and we're actually part of a global group, Great West Lifeco, and part of a conglomerate which is PowerCore, and there's lots of power in that organisation. But we have a very much a focus on Ireland, and we just feel like we need to be faster. And what we want to do is we want to become inventors. We want to invent things. We've been sort of delivering the same product and the same service to Irish consumers for a long time, but Irish consumers are changing, and clearly the whole economy, the global economy, the way consumers is changing, and we need to keep up with that. In fact, we need to be faster than the people who haven't even entered the market yet, and that's key for us. So how are we doing those type of things? So this is sort of back to where we focus. So when we say Horizon 1 is just incremental changes, that's in the business units. Where we're focusing is on the strategic and in the disruptive. All right, Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. So if an opportunity comes to us, oh, that's going to deliver some small change in our business, we're going to push that back out to the business to do. But if an opportunity comes for us in a parallel market, in a new business offering that we haven't been before, or something that's going to change the way and nature of our business, we're very much interested in that in the XO Hub. So that's one lens. A second lens that we use just to help us, and we had a conversation earlier. One of the guys challenged, what does innovation mean? So this is just me explaining what we think innovation is. I've no definitions here. So firstly, it's Horizon 2, Horizon 3. Secondly, it is around leveraging technology, all right, in a way that identifies and delivers unmet needs to customers and unrealized needs to customers. So, and we look to, I was asked to include some exemplars in this space, and this is some of the ones that we see. So whoever knew that you wanted to be able to talk to a computer and ask it questions? Did consumers ever really ask for that? But now that it's out there, lots of people have it, your Siri and your Alexa. To us, that's an unrealized need. No one knew we needed it. So what we're trying to do is find what are the things in the insurance space that people don't even know they need, they haven't realized yet. And there's obviously plenty in the unmet need space. There's lots of things where people say, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. So those are the two lenses we're looking for. What are people shouting for, and what are people don't even realize that they need, but they would really take up if it was there, all right? So how do we go about that? So, as I say, I wouldn't claim that we're the experts in this, all right? So, but this is how we do it, all right? And, you know, we're having some success, and, you know, I'm saying we're going to adapt and we're going to change as we go along. But the three strands of the DNA that we have within us in terms of innovation: collaborate internally, connect externally, and create at pace. And I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail. First one is collaborate internally, and actually the collaborate word is massive here. So being part of an insurance company with lots of actuaries and accountants who like to sit at their desks and work with spreadsheets and model sort of financial futures, and when will people die, and when will they get sick, and what's the likelihood of them living to 100, and those are very much tasks that we've been doing for many years, because that's what we do. We measure risk, we measure the chances of someone getting sick, and we offer those services out as insurance products. But what it does is creates a culture where people sort of probably have a bias towards sitting at their desk and working on their own, and that's not good in an innovation sense. So we definitely see collaboration, the people side of innovation, as being really important and something that we need to try and bring into our organization. So first thing, and certainly in our XO Hub, is we need to collaborate and really get people out of their desks and thinking about the customer, meeting the customer, asking the customer questions, talking to subject matter experts in our business, learning from them, talking to subject matter experts outside of our business, and trying to make the connections, make those sort of fire off in the brain. There's an idea, and that's how we would crack it. And our XO Hub is about a sandbox, a place in which we can play, a place in which we can experiment, that we can have a go at things, fail quickly if needs be, pivot quickly if needs be. So, but just get on and do it, so that we don't spend time multi-year, multi-million pound programs working on something that we don't know whether it's going to work or not. Second thing is about creating at pace, and so again, I think naturally the culture in Irish Life has been around a risk aversion. We manage risk, that's what we do as our business, and we have to do that, or else we lose a lot of money. So going fast isn't necessarily something that would be naturally in our DNA, but it's something we want in our DNA going forward. So we're looking at our realities. What are the realities? Like the things I spoke about at the start, how the world is changing and we need to be faster. There are plenty of pain points in our business, and there's lots of ideas. We're a large 2,500 people organization. There's just a huge amount of ideas out there, and they need to be tapped in. How might we fix those ideas? How might we address those realities? How might we take the ideas and apply them to our business business pain points? We need to go fast, design, discovery. We need to use prototyping. We need what's the minimum viable product that will allow us to test something. We need to make these things. We need to test them. We need to learn. We need to show them to our business and show them to our customers. And then we need to just get in or get out. And that's the created pace. And then we get a challenge at the end. So we've done that in our innovation center. How do we move that back into our business? And I'm not going to say I have the answer here on this one. It's a challenge. So one of the challenges we have in our innovation center is, and anyone who's working in innovation, it's, oh, those guys over there working on innovation. We need to make sure that we are always stitched into the business, that we have a way of transitioning any of the ideas, any of the great new products that we deliver into our business and operationalize them. And that's a different, I think that's another lecture in itself. The second just part of our creative pace, I'm sure you've seen all of this stuff before. There's so many methodologies out there, all right, but large organizations like methodologies, and it just is a way of hanging your hat on something. It's a way of explaining it to people. So we've picked on a combination of three. Everyone's heard about Agile. We've probably been talking about Agile, certainly within our organization, going back 15 years. But combining that with the principles of Lean, particularly so the way Lean is applied in the startup organization, and also really bringing in a focus on our customer through design thinking. So, really understanding the customer, understanding the problem, I think certainly one of our mantras in our XO Hub is that we need to be talking to customers on a daily basis, and that wouldn't have been natural for us 3 or 4 years ago. But we have a UX researcher. She spends her time talking to customers. We're showing and telling to the XO Hub and our wider business all the time. This is what customers are saying about the products that we have. This is what customers are thinking. This is whether they like it, whether they don't like it, they like the proposition, just their words. Just someone who represents the voice of the customer much stronger in our business. The thing to say here is traditionally we would have been a business where we are aligned, so there's a finance function and there's an IT function and there's an operations function, and they go on projects together, but they never stay together. So one of the other things we're trying to make sure we do in the XO Hub, and it's becoming a much more prevalent in our business, is cross-functional teams, and learning how the person who has the knowledge of how to write a piece of Java code, all right, is matched up with the person who understands the customer, and the person who the person who actually is going to talk to the customer for the next 20, 30 years, all right, in an insurance product. And those three people coming together and seeing how they could solve a problem, rather than I'm going to write a 50-page requirements document, I'm going to hand it to IT, they're going to build something, it's not going to be what we want, it's just going to be wrong. So cross-functional teams, smaller pods of collaboration is where we want to get to. The last piece is just connect externally. So we would see ourselves, again, traditionally as quite an inward-looking organisation, and certainly our CEO, who's a big sponsor for our innovation centre, is anxious that we would become a more outward-looking organisation. And these are some of the sources, and as I was talking to the guys earlier, we did some work with DCU recently in some research on some product. There's sort of dealings with Forrester just for some, information source, so it's a hose pipe of information, you could call it, if you were to plug it into your business. So at times it can be hard to really get what you want from it, but it's there, and they do a good service. As I say, we're part of the Great West Life Co, and we're stitched in with two organisations, Plug and Play, which is a sort of a dating service for startups, and Portage, which is a VC that's in our group. I'll talk a little bit about them now. So Plug and Play, I'm not sure if anyone heard of it. We joined it about 15 months ago. It's like it's a dating service for corporates and startups. So we want to be linked into the startup ecosystem. We like the energy that it brings, the way they work, the way they solve problems, and we're not going to be able to, as an organisation of 2,500 people in Dublin, be able to see what's going on globally. But the change that's going to come in our organisation could be out there, and we want to be stitched in somehow. So we're tied in with Plug and Play. Their job is that they understand us, understand our pain points, and they're constantly scanning the global ecosystem for startups that might solve problems that we have. And then we go and meet those startups and we see whether we can do anything with them. And actually we've done a number of pilots and proof of concept at this stage, successful and unsuccessful, with startups, and had a really sort of interesting time working with them. The second is our VC tie-in. So Portage is a company within the Irish Life, not within the Irish Life Group, but within the broader Great West Life and PowerCo. And again, it's interesting having a VC within your group. They're constantly pushing this startup and that startup. But again, for us, it's about just having that external focus, being challenged by what we're seeing in the VC and being seen in the startup community to go out there and do things differently. Okay. So just to I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but one of the things I thought I would do is just throw a slide here on a little bit on 3 minutes. Excellent. So what do startups bring that we find difficult, say, in Irish life with our history, I suppose, and legacy? I think they find customers. That they find, and they have an ability to spot customers that are underserved by the products that we have, the niches, etc. And they can develop communities of those customers. So they find ways of building communities of underserved customers, and they're able to focus then on those customers. And the risk for us is that those customers, that's firstly they're underserved. So they're a customer base we could have access to if we had a way of getting to them, but we just don't have the focus or the ability to get there. They bring a social good, and that's becoming more and more important. We just had a conversation earlier about plastic. So like they again, we have a traditional organisation with a culture, and they bring sort of new things like seeing what they're doing as a social good, and that's attractive to someone like Irish Life. They see gaps. In fact, they can bridge over things in our distribution line, and they find ways of getting to customers that maybe we wouldn't have thought of, and that's really important for us. They also can see opportunities in regulation. So regulations come and go, and we often see them as a problem, something that has to be managed. Whereas what startups, they can actually see the opportunity there and see a way of leveraging the power and of what's available in the regulation. And they solve big problems. They really do. So last few slides, just a few little tips that I had come up with, which was about working with startups. What were the lessons for corporates? So what did we learn? First thing, as always I would say to the corporates, is like we have a lot of corporates have innovation units these days. So engage through the innovation unit, because like that's where the expertise lies in this. But for corporates, you've got to be realistic about your ability to engage with startups, and that's important. Not to waste their time, which comes to the next one, which is we need to be able to say no quickly. Share and explain the need for the corporation. So when you're working with startups, we need to explain the needs of the organization, and so if anybody feels they're going to work with a startup, those are the things that you should expect from your corporate. Last one is respect. We should respect startups. I often see situations where big corporates think, oh, this is a tiny company, it's only 3 people, and we can sort of leverage off them, and it can create a bad vibe, I suppose, in the relationship. So what I always say to our business people when they're working with startups is create a relationship of respect. And then the last one on the working with startups, the lessons for corporates is split the pie. There should be something for everyone here. So like Irish Life is a big organisation, we've been around for a long time, but the startups have something to give, and we should be able to share the pie with them. And then the next section, and the last section, is just around working with corporates. So what would I tell startups from working with corporates is say hello. So get to know us, all right, and get to know the individual and acknowledge the difference in culture. Think big. So often we have startups come in and they say, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and they promise the moon and stars, and we say, listen, just solve this one problem for us. We can build a business relationship and we can move on. Stop pitching, start listening. So again, working with startups, often what we get is pitch. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And we want to say, we want a conversation, we want a partnership. Focus on the right person at the right time. So again, that's part of stop pitching, listen and get the message right. And then be transparent, have clear objectives, appropriate metrics for the partnership, and then feel the need. That's for startups, they need to feel the pain that the corporates are feeling and understand those problems and help us solve them. Okay, that's me. Thank you.
I think we're good.
Sure.
Sorry, this short pause. I'm not addressing anybody in the room. I'm speaking to the group in rooms 301 and 302. Because this, Thanks, Katie. To those students who are languishing in rooms 301 and 302, who were told that there was no space for you at the grown-ups table here, that has turned out to be not the case. So although this room was a sellout, we have loads of space in here, and I think the speakers would appreciate it if you could make your way in and join us in them and, you know, feel the real atmosphere in the room. So those in rooms 305 and 306, please come in and join us now. Thank you. You won't mind.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you. Jer Mitchell is my name. I'm the Group HR Director at Permanent TSB. And just give you maybe 30 seconds about myself. So, and it's innovative in its own right, I guess. So Permanent TSB are a 202-year-old organisation, and miraculously we're still regarded as Ireland's #1 challenger bank after all those years. And in that 202-year history, 3 years ago was the first time that the bank decided to appoint a non-HR person to the role of HR Director, which was quite unusual in its own right. So my own path is I guess very much on the customer side, very much on the commercial side, starting in branch banking, working my way through to regional sales directorship, then going into the executive team and working from there in terms of rebuilding out of the Troika issue, because if anyone wants to ever put their mind back to that time, back to 2012 through to 15, and then a big lovely remediation program that I can't use bad language to describe, and then in May 2017 into HR. So it's quite a, I guess, an unusual path for somebody to get into HR, but I have a deep passion for innovation, and I had the pleasure of studying under Peter many years ago when I did a master's in strategic HR and innovation. So it's a passion that has existed long within me, and this afternoon I'm going to try and cobble together a couple of bits and pieces that touch on the commercial world, but also, insofar as I can, try and touch on the role of HR in terms of its ability and its role to move away from the tactical personnel management that we've all grown accustomed to through payroll and benefits and what have you, to actually becoming a true strategic enabler, and focusing in particular on two areas: leadership and the profound influence of leadership on culture, to open up the organisation to the idea of innovation, to create a psychologically safe environment for people to share ideas and to bring forward stuff. So unlike most HR functions, I'm starting on the outside as opposed to focusing on the internal problems that we have. So we're going to have a quick look at today's workplace, the case for innovation itself, what might need to be done within the organisation, a kind of a for example as to what we've done ourselves in the last couple of years, and then I might finish with the importance of alignment in terms of bringing strategy, culture and talent together as kind of like that holy trinity of focus points that we really need to kind of have front and centre on this journey. So this is a busy slide, and I hate when people say that because nobody can read it, but there's probably 3 points I would pull out in it. One is the fact that this is kind of a fact base or a quick snapshot of the world of work, because without engaging the people in our workplace, the chances of innovation are going to wither on the vine. And there's kind of 3 main pieces. Optimization and technology includes, we'll say, digital disruption and automation, robotics, and all that goes with it. And within that domain here, about 2/3 of executives worldwide believe that a quarter of the workforce needs to be retrained by 2023. So in terms of actually embracing and engaging that talent pool and bringing it to life in the way that it should be is a huge ask. In terms of capability uplift, 72% of organizations believe that they haven't got the right talent, and 20% of those said same organizations are underutilizing the talent that they have. So there is a huge pool of latent resource and ability that is being completely and utterly untapped, whether they've been forgotten about or whether they're deemed to be old school and they're not ready to be trained or they don't have the ability. They are being forgotten about, and it's a huge wasted resource. And then on the colleague experience side, so we all know that we consume product and services today at 2019 levels, but in work it's like 1979. So like from a colleague experience point of view, we really have to do more to bring life into the organisation such that it reflects the world in which we live. And 87% of organisations that have high levels of engagement outperform the market time out of number. And individually, people, this 3.4x, people are 3.4 times more productive in highly engaged organizations. So again, the role of culture and leadership in nurturing that level of engagement and unleashing the energy of the people in the organization is hugely important in innovation terms. So then if we take the workplace and then we look at the world, and again, I'm conscious that a lot of people will use some of these slides, but if you take Alibaba, the world's most valuable retailer, if you take, but it has no inventory, if you take Airbnb, the world's biggest provider of accommodation, but yet it doesn't have any real estate, and if you take the likes of Netflix, the biggest producer of movies in the world, but yes, it has no cinemas or it has no real estate either. The world of the business model that we have kind of grown up with and lived with up to the last kind of 10 years has been completely and utterly thrown on its head. I won't touch on the other three because of time, but I guess the point is landed hopefully with those three. And then workplace, digital disruption, and then what does that mean for financial services? So this slide here attempts to try and just kind of paint a picture to try and say, well, look at what's happening in the ecosystem and in the environment. And very simply, you can see that our lunch has been eaten, and the dinner and the main course as well, by the way, over here by kind of what we'd call neobanks. Now, a lot of these players are in the area of personal financial planning, a lot of them are in the area of payments, and that kind of stuff, where self-direction and the role of self-direction actually is quite interesting in cultural terms, in terms of what does that do in rebuilding trust with society and rebuilding trust with customers after the last 10 years. And if you think about trust in banking, like the word trust itself is deeply imbued in the language of banking because it's derived from the word credit, which is the Latin for credere, to trust in. So what's the role of digital disruption in rebuilding trust with customers and with society? And here we have these organizations sitting outside of the regulatory perimeter, effectively providing services, but yet they're completely unregulated. So where do we sit from an arbitrage perspective there? So again, these are challenges that are effectively damaging the business model, but also creating the unmet needs and the unrealized needs of customers. And then we pull around and to the earlier point in terms of when customers and when yourselves go on Amazon or you go on Google or you go on Twitter or whatever, and then you flick into your banking app, you expect the same level of seamless experience. And yet every bank in the world has been broke for the last 10 years. And for the 10 years prior to that, there was such an amount of business being written and commercial development happening that effectively investing in infrastructure didn't happen. So essentially you're looking at a 20-year cycle whereby the right level of investment has not happened, bar just keeping the show on the road. And for some organizations, unfortunately, the wheels came off the wagon once or twice, but for the most part there's a huge amount to be done here now. So that's kind of where we're at, and we're all at different stages. I've put up just the retail banking, I guess the banks represented in Ireland from a customer point of view, and all of us are at different stages in terms of how we evolve our business model and how we build a proposition that meets with the Ireland of today. And then in permanent TSB terms then, so we kind of bring it down from the sector then, and we look to see how have we actually looked at this. And so in terms of our innovation portfolio mix, we're starting at the bottom and we're working our way up. So the most important thing is to keep the lights on. So our two core systems in terms of stabilize and maintain, that bedrock has to be, it really has to be so resilient. Otherwise, we don't get the right to actually go into the area of developing opportunities that are adjacent to our existing business model. And we certainly never earn the right to get to the top here, which is really about disrupting and bringing disruption to the marketplace in the way that we would like it to be. Now, financial services is different to so many other consumer products in the sense that the complexity of financial products in terms of opaque terms and conditions, vague performance attributes and what have you means that financial services are probably the only area where you buy a product without knowing how the product is going to perform over 30 or 40 years. So how do you actually stay relevant and how do you actually manage that product through a life cycle for a customer whose life is also changing from the point of starting a job to starting a family to working through middle life to retirement at 65. So again, the challenge within financial services in innovation terms is hugely challenging. And from a regulatory point of view, it is arguable that innovation will effectively start to come back, such is the complexity of financial services products. And the role of regulation in stemming innovation is a huge challenge for us right now. Okay? And I'll show you some examples with that in a second. So managing this information portfolio is an ongoing cycle, and in actual fact it's one of the core skill sets we're trying to develop within the organization, and I'll give you a flavour of that in the next slide. So what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to say, well, look at, we established 3 years ago our FIZ team. It's FIZ with an S, so it's Fintech Innovation Strategy. and we established a team and we domiciled them away from the rest of the organization. We did so on purpose, and they wanted to go there as well, such that they weren't pulled into the day-to-day of, Jesus, tonight here we go again. They were in an entirely different space. They had an opportunity. Nobody wore a tie. They all wore runners, and they got to look at things in a slightly different way. And in many respects, we positioned them within an ecosystem where there were other startups and other fintechs and what have you, such that they could feed off each other. Now, we kept ties very close with the bank in terms of kind of the core systems to try and say, look, can we actually build as we go here? And then every so often, they would take a list of stuff and we would put together an innovation opportunity team. And this team would, broadly speaking, be a blended team whereby you have 3 people from the Fintech Innovation Center and 3 people, we'll say, from our core banking and our core business model. And we would start to work these teams together. And I'm going to ruin Peter's PhD program. Really all that can happen here is one of 3 things. One is the bloody thing works and is put back into the system. There's a new piece of value identified outside of the business model, and we go ahead and we develop that, or we just kill it quickly and peacefully. But it's really that mindset of ideating, designing, modeling it in some way, getting to a minimum viable product, refining it again, and then keep going around and around and around we go. And so it's constant iteration over time. So it's the release of incremental value as opposed to one big massive silver bullet that's going to change the future of the organization. That's broadly speaking how we started to push together and what's working today. And then I have a fidget spinner as well. The symbols don't mean anything really, it's just kind of colourful. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this. In particular, I want to spend a little bit of time where you're sitting on the top left-hand corner, and in particular, the area of culture and leadership. And I'm going to start with leadership because of the profound influence on culture that leadership has. Leadership behavior, the accountability of leaders, the respect that leaders have for people in the organization, and actually thinking about what we mean by leadership. What is leadership? It's not management. But it's a significant position of power, and people look up to leaders to say, well, look at how are you going to help us do this? You have the power. But power in physics is defined as the release of energy. It's not about force. It's not about kicking stuff through. It's not about delivering something for my ego or for somebody else's. It's about releasing the energies of the people within the organization to go and create and take care of customers and look after each other and to deliver for both customers and society in a way that they may not have done before. And within that, it shapes the culture in terms of, number one, having a shared vision that's supported by values that actually connect and are meaningful to people in the organization. It creates a psychologically safe and open environment where ideas and conversations are encouraged. And people get a chance to kind of share what it is on their mind. And this concept of speaking freely, we've moved away from whistleblowing entirely because of all the connotations and associated with whistleblowing. But speak freely. Say what's on your mind. Talk to us about our customer. Talk to us about what's happening in the organization, and having leaders that are not defensive in terms of embracing that. The impact of all of that then in terms of performance management, I'll show you in a second, because performance management really has been very individually focused in terms of what you've done and how you've done it. Whereas now we're moving into a model whereby it's all team-based. And how we're putting our teams together, this is Project Forte, or Program Forte. We mentioned it at the start of this year. So we're putting 70 million behind this program that focuses on 3 pillars. One is the customer journey, number 1. Number 2, the core platforms, and then building an API layer to take advantage of open banking through PSD2, and then ways of working. How do we actually work more collaboratively and in a much more integrated way? And where do we go with that? I couldn't resist putting in a light bulb because I knew it would upset Peter. And we have our Fintech Innovation Center over there. We have another symbol for it, but I thought that one was appropriate. So where we go from there then, this allows us then to build a team. So unlike previous hierarchical teams, yes, we have a business owner, but now we have all of these self-organizing teams where you have peer-to-peer accountability. You have daily stand-ups. You don't have project managers, you have agile coaches. You know, you don't have team leads, you now have scrum masters. So you bring the whole piece of agile to life. And you develop proof of concept that way, and the whole piece with regard to iteration of all of the models here with regards to how we actually bring that through life is going to provide a huge challenge in terms of performance management, because it's no longer about the individual, it's about the interdependency across teams of people networked right throughout the business, and in actual fact beyond the business in partnerships in the commercial world. So what has this led to? The so what question, what have you developed? Well, very little so far. But we've huge hopes. We've huge hopes for the future. So I guess the last biggest thing that we've brought to life has been in the last kind of year, which is an online lending platform, which is we can issue a term loan end to end in 15 minutes. No customer interaction, no signatures, nothing. And nobody else is able to do that right now. So that has been innovative in its own right. From a HR point of view, we've partnered with the likes of Hire Up Online to try and get employee referrals through, and that would have been different to the standard model. But what we did previously, if you think about the financial crisis, in 2008 we had 6 billion of deposits, and 4 years later we had 12 billion at a time when 40 billion left the state. And one of the key enablers of that was the development of a product called an interest-first deposit account, whereby you got your interest within a week of opening the account. You didn't have to wait 2 or 3 years to get it. And it was a massive game changer, and nobody has been able to copy it since. In 2014, when we re-entered the lending market, we developed a home mover product which said to people, we're happy for you to hold on to your tracker and move it to a new property because your family has grown and you haven't got space where you're at. Nobody else was able to follow that for a number of years. So that's the kind of innovation we're trying to bring to life. Within our business model, we've moved from a branch manager model, whereby we have one in each town, to a territory management model. Such is the connectivity with people nowadays. We can't have a situation whereby the guy in Tullamore is doing something different to the guy in Athlone who's doing something different to the person in Mullingar, because they're all 30-minute commutes. So we're moving to a territory model within that old 202-year-old branch banking model. So there are kind of areas in which we're trying to innovate, both at a business level, a product level, and also within our structure. And then finally, I started with talking about kind of the importance of alignment. This is the holy trinity for myself and for our own team. Have the right strategy, the focus on the culture, that open culture, that respectful culture, that culture whereby piracy is killed and builders are rewarded for their dedication and their resilience in iterating, that compassion is shown for those that actually have a failure and they get a chance to go again. But most importantly, it's really about releasing the energies of the talent within the organization. Thousands of whom in all of our respective organizations have really not been tapped or opened up to the possibility of the future in the way that it could be. So I'm not sure whether that covers a huge amount about innovation. It touches a little bit on HR and on the broader environment, and I'm quite happy to take any questions at any stage. So thank you very much.
Might be under yourself there, so take them off. I am, yeah.
Okay, guys, well, I feel terrible having to guillotine people at 15 minutes because I could have listened to those two all day, but in order to move the event along, I'm afraid we have to do that. But Brian, welcome along, and I think we're going to hear another perspective here.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we all?
Great.
When I was invited along, I thought, I can come along and speak and hear about fantastic topics around innovation, or I can sit in front of the TV and listen to a damn squib of a budget. And I chose this, and I think we all made the correct decision based on what's come before us. So I am Brian Marin, and I'm the managing partner of Journey Partners, and we are an organization that focuses on innovation through people. So I'm here to tell you a couple of stories about open innovation and how that's creating an impact in the world of innovation today. I started off my career in this beautiful city of Boston. I was actually on that floor there looking out that window and had a magnificent time in this beautiful old traditional investment bank, and it was so old, kind of New England money, that their clients were literally dying off, and they realized we can't get their kids to stay with us because we're that old school. We're not being innovative around what we're presenting. So we set up what we now know, or now think, was the first Fintech Innovation Lab. Back then, when you said Fintech, you probably thought of something like this. And we didn't actually call it Fintech at the time. We didn't know that it was an incubator at the time. That meant eggs. And we had a fantastic time working with a variety of different stakeholders who were in this burgeoning Boston startup scene, trying to get new perspectives on how the digital landscape was changing so rapidly in the 1990s. So I had a magnificent time over there. I came back and I went via London to Dublin, set up a company in Dublin with my brother, family business, always slightly dodgy. But had a magnificent time. One of the great projects that we were able to work on, which kind of linked back to my Boston days, was we worked on the first startup accelerator in Ireland. So we built the idea for it, engaged universities like DCU, UCD, Trinity, and went to the government and raised 25 million for the first accelerator. Again, at a time when you said accelerator, everyone thought of this rather than startups. So it was a good opportunity to be at the forefront of something quite different then. That was the same summer, to put it in perspective, that Y Combinator, the most famous accelerator in the world, was created over in Silicon Valley. So we often think that we're behind the times when it comes to some of these things. In fact, we're right there with some of the best in the world in terms of innovation. So I loved that. And I have since gone down much more people route, because one of the things that I found fascinating was that we found certain people better able to handle the creative and innovation process. We found other people who were quite restrictive around change within organizations. So I went down a people route and started to understand a little bit more about what motivates people in different directions. And then 3 years ago, set up Journey Partners. And our focus as an organization is working on innovation within traditional and highly regulated sectors. So we have worked with governments around the world, both state and semi-state bodies, to help them develop out their innovation structures. We work with financial services organizations. We set up a Fintech Lab for one of the larger global financial services players. Healthcare, we acted as the innovation leads for eHealth Ireland for a while, eHealth Ireland being the technological arm of the HSE. And then our probably major focus has been one of these really traditional areas of aviation and travel technology. Very little has changed around the aviation and travel space for a long time. The pace of innovation there is incredibly slow. What you experience on a trip, apart from maybe being able to book it online rather than going through a tour agent, is very similar to what you would have experienced 30 years ago. Maybe a little bit less comfort when you're flying with a Ryanair or an EasyJet or someone like that. But that really drew us to that industry in terms of what we could do that was slightly different and actually brought a different perspective to things there. So we've been spending a lot of time on that and developed a thesis around innovation and how open innovation works in particular, which focuses on this internal versus external innovation work. So we have worked and helped to build labs that are very focused internally around culture change and developing new processes. And then we have worked on others that are very focused on the external environment and where potentially disruptive innovation will come from in an industry. If you think of an industry like aviation leasing, which makes a crazy amount of money every year, really almost like insurance. It is one of those industries that is just ripe for disruption. I mean, the people who are in that space are getting paid an awful lot of money. The companies are making an awful lot of profit. And really all they're doing is buying airplanes and then renting them out. It's, Avis and those kind of companies on acid. So they're quite conscious that disruption could very well come true. The landscape, because not as many people know about the details of aviation leasing, it's had a smaller workforce compared to, say, Fintech, for example, which have had quite large workforces who are all thinking about how to disrupt their own businesses. I think that's why the pace of change has been a little bit lower. But it's ripe for that, and they're very conscious of that. So we've worked with one of the larger innovation leasing companies to look at how they build more of an internal versus external focus. They have been quite concentrated internally. And if you look at the biggest examples of disruptive innovation around the world, it very rarely comes from within an industry. It typically comes from outside the industry. And the challenge with that is if you start to disrupt your own industry, then you could be leaving an awful lot of cash on the table. Like in pure commercial perspective, how do you know when is the right time to launch that new product that will disrupt the rest of your product portfolio? You could be losing hundreds of millions, billions in the case of that industry on the table without actually understanding that you should have gone 3 years later with this new product. And then the other danger is if you go first, you're making all the other mistakes that everyone else is learning from. So there's a strong argument if you're in an industry like that you don't go first, but you invest in those that do. So you bring forward the startups and the opportunities that are looking at disrupting your industry. You take an equity position in them and you allow them to start disrupting rather than doing it yourself. And on the back of that thesis, we have worked with a few different people to really look at the commercial success of innovation. We hate what is known as innovation theater. The amount of companies whose innovation departments lie within marketing is ridiculous. And we tend to avoid those like the plague. These are our key things. Unless something increases revenue, cut costs, or enhances the customer experience, we're not interested in. Excuse me, I've been traveling for the last 3 months and I land back in Ireland to pick up a cold. And this is one of the things that led us to Propeller Shannon. So Propeller came out of the back of Ireland with this enormous history in aviation and travel. Shannon in particular was where duty-free was invented, 1949. It's hard to imagine an airport anywhere in the world without duty-free now. The first commercially successful aviation leasing firm, founded by Tony Ryan of Ryanair, was set up in Shannon. And now 50% of the world's aircraft are leased, and 50% of those are leased out of Ireland. And we have Europe's largest airline in Ryanair, Aer Lingus, with an incredible heritage. We have Irish people at the head of IAG, Qantas, Embraer, the Brazilian aircraft manufacturer. So real incredible heritage. And then on travel technology side, we have Cartrawler, Datalex, OpenJaw, BoxEver, Hostel World, the biggest seller of hostel beds in the world. All these people who are leaders in their niche. And we had never really recognized that Ireland was one of the leading global ecosystems around this space. So we decided to raise money from a variety of different partners: Boeing, Datalex, Irish Aviation Authority, the first regulator in the world to invest in an accelerator like this, and partnered with the Shannon Group, DCU Ryan Academy, and ourselves to create Propeller. We invested in 19 different companies over the past 2 years. And the interesting thing about this is all those companies who've invested get an equity position in these companies. This is a non-traditional fund. It's not just, we wait for a return and then we send the money back to the investors. They actually get a percentage share in each of these companies. So they are driven to help them succeed. And if their industries are disrupted by these companies coming through, then they actually get to share in that upside. So that was a core component of this, and it's right across the aviation and travel space that we have been looking at in terms of companies. The other interesting thing is because of the story we were able to tell about Ireland, half of our companies came from other countries, not just Ireland. We have people coming from Los Angeles right through to Dubai. And that's where Ireland can play a different kind of game in this space. One other example that I'd like to tell you about is Vive Air Labs. So in association with an airline in Colombia, we co-founded Vive Air Labs, the first aviation innovation lab in Latin America. It's been a fascinating cycle where we had to concentrate a little bit more on three key things. First is democratizing payments. Second, building open data airlines. And the third is building an innovation ecosystem. And I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. 70% of Latin Americans don't have bank accounts. A third of our passengers were trying to pay with cash. Nightmare for an airline. Real nightmare. And yet, if we looked at payments, 80% of people used WhatsApp to communicate with businesses. So not just with each other, that was well over 90%, very close to 100%. But regularly used it to contact businesses. That's slightly different to here. So we set up a payment system through WhatsApp, and it's been so successful. I can't give you the exact figures because it's slightly sensitive. If I just pull something out. But we're expecting a return 7 figures within the first year, and probably multiples of those 7 figures. So we will be in the millions in terms of the return from that WhatsApp payments alone. So that's one of the areas we've had to look at. Second is around open data. And open data has become fascinating to us because governments have been releasing data sets for quite a while. And interesting explorations have come out of it, to the point where the EU has now realized that we are the people who have been paying for the government to gather data, and therefore we should have open access to that. So the EU is putting in regulations around actually releasing data from government departments. We're finding NGOs are rapidly following in that direction as well. Lots of the kind of World Bank, UNDP, all those kind of organizations are focused in this kind of space. And we think the private sector is very rapidly going to follow, because the opportunity there for people to play with your data and not have to pay for even bigger teams of extraordinary data scientists is quite opportunistic. So we want to become the first open data airline in the world. And it's a big challenge. Just even going through that data and seeing what you can anonymize is quite interesting. But it's a big one for us. And then the last piece was partnerships. So we've actively built an ecosystem in Latin America where we can with a variety of different people. So we're trying to engage the airports in terms of them releasing their data so that it can be integrated into ours. We're trying to release the municipalities' data so that they engage. And we're looking at solutions now where if you can integrate, say, the traffic systems with the public transport systems, with the airports and the flight detail systems, you'll be able to get a notification that you should be leaving the house 15 minutes early because there's a traffic jam. Or actually, you can leave 20 minutes later because your flight's delayed. And it all becomes much more real time. It would be smarter for you to get this bus than to get an Uber because the bus lanes are slightly lower today. Those kind of things are going to be really interesting to us. The other thing is universities are loving this. DCU should be on that as well because they're actively engaged in this ecosystem. And it means that students for the first time are going to have real data to play with in terms of actually developing innovative solutions to problems. So we want to be at the forefront of this and driving it forward. The other element is it's gotten significant publicity in the international trade press, so that has helped us in a variety of ways as an airline in terms of just building profile. So I'm going to leave you with a few things in terms of lessons from this space. If you're going to be looking at external partners, one of the things you need to look at is how you engage in external deal flow. So Propeller, for example, is an example of the deal flow process, how you actually find those startups that you want to look at. Plug and Play was mentioned earlier as well in terms of those types of organizations. But finding the amount of deal flow and the amount of startups that you'll need to work with in a variety of different sectors, you need to decide how you're going to go about doing that. Establish how you can help startups and create pathways for that to happen. One of the biggest challenges is companies say that they want to work with startups, but they've no idea how to actually integrate them into that process. And that's a huge barrier for success. So you actually have to do the groundwork in that and say, here's how we're going to move things along, here's how we're going to have simplified legals, that kind of thing. And that's a big challenge in corporates. It's a huge challenge for us. Use it as a tool to engage employees. People want to be involved in innovation, so use it as that process for actually increasing engagement within an organization and seeing how innovation happens. Get out and evangelize. People won't come to you unless they know what your problems are. So you got to actually get out and talk about, here are the issues that we have and we want solutions around them, come to us with them. And then finally, engage the wider community and partner where you can. Innovation is a collaborative effort. Diversity and inclusiveness is key to that. The examples of more diverse environments coming up with more creative solutions are just riddled through business. So the more people you can engage with across that, the better. So that is my few thoughts for today. Thank you very much, everyone.
That's okay. It'll go here. Okay, I think we're all plugged in and good to go. I'm Ryan Leach. I work in the innovation team there at KBC Bank here in Dublin. And today I thought quite long and hard about what I wanted to take you through, and I'd kind of settled on some best practices and so on, and I ran through that with my wife on Sunday and in great detail. As I said, it's a fairly lonely existence in innovation, and I thought Paula would be interested. She wasn't. When it was all said and done, I mean, her only feedback was, well, they could probably just Google that, and I think she was. So thank you for your support, darling. You're probably right. So I scrapped that and thought I'd take a bit of a different approach, and instead of best practice, I thought I'd give you some of the worst practice, some of the issues that we had, some of the problems that we faced, some of the things that we did terribly, and hopefully from that you can derive some unique insights and I think some things that, again, hopefully things that you'll be able to do differently in your organization. That's I suppose the corporate obligation. I have to put it up there. Ignore that. I'll take you through a little bit about the Kbc Innovation Hub, maybe though, and the genesis of that Innovation Hub, because in around January 2017 it was, there was a real feeling, and indeed a real reality, that what we were talking about to our customers, the digital-first, customer-centric challenger bank in Ireland, really, I don't think we were living up to that at all. The products and the services that we were delivering were far from digital-first, customer-centric, and they certainly weren't challenging the market. So in January of 2017, we decided to do probably the least innovative thing you can do, which is set up an innovation hub. Everybody has one. And it was that sort of environment in which we kicked off the iHub, as I said, back in January 17. I won't bore you with that too much. Suffice to say, I've been around the block a little bit in different sorts of industries, logistics for a long time, and then in 2010, not the best time to move to Ireland, but 2010, came here and got stuck into financial services, and specifically, I suppose, innovation. So where did we start? I mean, it's the honest view is we started with an appraisal of where we're at, or of where we thought we were at, but really it wasn't all that, it's fair to say it wasn't all that detailed an appraisal. I mean, we knew we had to move quickly, we knew we had to move with purpose, we knew we had a hell of a lot of dates and deadlines that we had to hit, but what we didn't do was make a really honest appraisal of where the organisation was at that particular point in time. So when I say we moved quickly, my God, we moved quickly. We had Scrum teams up and running, delivering code within weeks. We knew at that point in time, I cringe when I say this, but we knew what our first album was going to be. That was a sort of ridiculous talk that we were using back then, and by God, we were delivering, or so we thought. But when we got to a stage where it was time to start moving this code and moving these deliveries through the various environments, we started to hit all sorts of blockers with the rest of the business. KBC for a long time was a waterfall house. I'm sure most of you know what that means. If not, we can discuss it a little later. But we were there now, delivering in an agile way, and delivering these iterative packets of code into production. And the business didn't have a clue what we were doing. It was alien to them. We took these ideas through compliance, legal, risk, data protection. They just weren't set up to move in that particular way. So what we had, actually I should mention as well, our core banking provider, Temenos, a waterfall house. To this day, Temenos, the core banking provider at KBC and soon to be Bank of Ireland, they develop code in a waterfall manner. It just didn't align. We didn't do that analysis up front. So again, when we moved or tried to move code into production, the brakes went on. Because really when we thought we were going to move into this lovely green field, off you go guys, decide what you want to do and go and deliver it, really it was anything but greenfield. There was a fairly complex environment in which we had to navigate. Had we done a warts and all analysis up front, and had we brought people along that journey, it's certainly an issue we could have mitigated to some degree. And that's the next point. I mean, it's a journey. It really is a journey, and you need to make sure that everybody's on board. We tried. We kind of tried. We started with engagement with the various business areas. We went and spoke to the guys in the contact center. We spoke to the guys in legal, compliance, risk, all of those sorts of areas that we'd spoken about before. But I think it's fair to say we didn't really honestly engage. I mean, when we engaged to a point, but really then when we started to get the sorts of answers that we didn't like the sound of, we just sort of muscled our way through regardless, and woe betide anybody who got in our way. We built some alliances, certainly, but in hindsight, when we really look back, the alliances we built were with people and departments who kind of felt the same way that we did anyway. So we made friends with people who were probably already friends with us, and we didn't bring those other sort of areas along with us. Now, really, in hindsight again, what we should have done, it's like any sort of sales process, and I'm sure in all of your, forget college, in any of your high school business classes, it's putting things in terms of what's in it for them. So, what's in it for the person in legal to say yes? We didn't put it in those terms at all. So, quite simply, and again, back to year 8, year 7 high school here, translating features into benefits and putting it in terms of what's in it for them. We failed to do that in the early days, and we certainly paid a fairly hefty penalty when we were trying to move at the pace in which we really needed to move at. Be humble. There's a face you want to punch, isn't it? No, he's not here, is he? Be humble. Now, look, without getting too carried away with myself here, it's probably a lesson for your business careers and in life generally, but certainly in setting up an innovation hub, it's something that we in KBC and the Kbc Innovation Hub probably could have taken heed of a little bit more than what we did. I mean, if we take that step back, in January 2017, when we started setting up the hub, we took different people from various parts of the business. We took the best business people, we thought the best business people, we took the best developers, we took the best testers, we put them all in a room together, and there was a certain confidence that came with that, a certain swagger, to be perfectly honest. Now, with that swagger, I suppose you've immediately offended a lot of people, and we certainly did that. There's no question about it. I mean, bear in mind that weeks prior to the Innovation Hub starting in KBCI, we were wearing suits and we were looking like bankers and so on. 3 weeks later, we'd taken all the people, we were wearing band t-shirts, we had Beats headphones on, we were sitting on beanbags. And people, what happened? Who do they think they are? And again, there was a certain element of truth in that as well. We needed to admit, and I don't think we did initially, that there were things that we were just really, really bad at. There were certain things we were very good at. We knew our core platform really well, and if you were a fintech or a third party who wanted to come and integrate something with that core platform, yeah, we could do that really quickly and with really high quality. What we didn't admit, and to be honest, not even what we didn't admit, what we probably didn't even realize at the time, were there were things we were absolutely terrible at as well. We weren't that great at writing our own code and deploying it with the sort of speed and quality that many fintechs and big techs and so on could do. We simply didn't realize. But what we were seeing then was a real disconnect between what the third parties were doing, great speed, great quality, and what we were doing in-house. And we needed to be humble enough to actually recognize our own failings. There's very few companies, I mean, GE's already been mentioned, and I'm talking GE back in the day, GE, who can do lots and lots of really good things and have that real breadth of expertise and that real breadth of talent. KBC are good at certain things, we're not good at others. We can admit that, that's okay. And we have. Now you'll see some of our onboarding journey, for instance. We've engaged the services of a company called ID Scan, the same company that puts software into Heathrow Airport. They sell software to Scotland Yard, biometric type software. We use APIs from Apple and Google for our account opening journeys and our lost and stolen card journeys. We use the services of a Polish fintech who act as the intermediary between KBC and all of the other banks in the context of PSD2. So we've learned a lesson there, but it took some time, it took some pain, and it took some embarrassing lessons when it was pretty clear that we couldn't or wouldn't deliver as quickly and with as high quality as we said we were going to. Now, diversity is an interesting one. It's a popular topic at the moment, and rightly so, but I want to take it maybe a little bit further than, I suppose, the conventional ideas around diversity. Because to be fair, I think KBC is a very diverse place to work. And certainly the Innovation Hub itself is a very diverse place to work. But I wanted to take it just a level below that. So while we consider the senior management team of the Innovation Hub, we were from different nationalities, men and women represented and so on, different age groups and so on. We really all sort of thought the same way. We could all see the bigger picture. None of us really cared too much for the detail. We just knew we had to deliver. We knew we had to deliver on time. We knew we had to push people 24/7, and that was the common, I suppose, the common thread. We had some enormous arguments, but all of that we could agree on. And there wasn't anybody else there in that team sort of saying, hang on a minute, guys, just take your foot off for a second. There's a different way to do this. There's a better way to do this. There's a way to do this that would mean in the medium and long term you might get better results. We didn't have that view. It was go, 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 go. And as I said, we all agreed on that, if nothing else. Similarly, around the rest of the business, we spoke to and gathered the opinions of the people who were probably going to agree with us anyway. And for the people who didn't, and for the departments who didn't, again, we muscled our way through. It's a very, very short-term view. And even within our own department, I'll give you a very quick example. I'll come back to the be humble slide, but there was a process I wanted to tackle. We wanted to get more people activated in the mobile app, and I knew that I had the best way to do that. I was convinced. So I shopped it around, legal, compliance, risk. Everybody was happy enough that we weren't going to be doing anything illegal. That's a start. I took it to the guys, to the Scrum teams. I said, fellas, what do you think? The customer goes here, they move there. Hey, presto, they're through. What do you think? I mean, silence, absolute silence. Guys, again, can we, any pitfalls, anything you foresee, any issues, speak now, forever hold your peace. More silence. Fantastic, guys, that'll do me. Crack on and get it delivered as quickly as you can. It was about 2 or 3 weeks later when we realized there was a fundamental flaw in my genius idea. We're effectively leaving ourselves open to financial crime, a SIM swapping fraud. I was furious with the guys. Fellas, we took you through this 3 weeks ago. You sat here, everybody nodded along. What I failed to realize and what I failed to appreciate was it's a very different group of people. Developers, real hardcore techies, not all that comfortable speaking up in that sort of forum. A lot of the guys, English isn't their first language, and they just didn't feel compelled to challenge in that sort of forum. I mean, that's my fault entirely. Entirely. I think it's your job as a manager, and particularly as a manager in innovation, to make sure that you're getting diverse opinions into your products and services, that you've created an environment in which people from all different walks of life feel comfortable in bringing you those ideas. And again, particularly in innovation, because some of the ideas are a little bit out there and you really can be left looking pretty silly. 3 minutes, thank you. You really can be looking pretty silly if there's not an accepting sort of environment in which to raise these sorts of ideas. Finally, I don't really have much of a neat segue here, but I wanted to take you through this anyway. The space you create, it really does matter. Well, that doesn't look too good, but it really does matter. And not for the reasons you think it probably matters. We've all seen the various innovation hubs, and there's beanbags and there's all of this sort of rubbish. KBC have a very similar sort of setup. There's the big whiteboards, the beanbags, the great AV, the big glass atrium, all of this sort of stuff. Lovely coffee, real milk, and I'll come to that in a second, it matters. And then cut to the rest of it.
Well, thanks, Ryan, and thanks, everybody. Now we're going to take a little coffee break. So there's coffee outside. You probably want to get selfies and autographs with the speakers. That'll all be facilitated outside. So why don't we take a 15-minute break, and we'll see you back in here at no later than 22. So, Carol, welcome along.
Thank you. It's great to be here and see everyone here. Now, I wanted to take you on a bit of a journey. But first of all, I wanted to start with a statement. I don't believe that companies create great ideas. I believe that people do. Now, let me talk to you about why I'm standing here, and a little bit about my story and how I ended up here. Now, first of all, my accent's a little messed up. I grew up in 4 countries. Now, I'm not going to tell you what they are. I'll let you guess and see how you go. But as part of that journey, I ended up spending a bit of time in Australia, so there's one giveaway. And part of that time in Australia, I had the ability to disrupt the market. So while I was out there, we had the ability to take Virgin Money to Australia. They told us it couldn't be done. The market was crowded. What were you going to do, and why were we going to do it differently? What we did do differently was think differently. And part of the Virgin Group was about putting the customer first and thinking about what did the customer not want, not what the bank's bottom line wanted. So we went into the market and we launched Virgin Money. We launched one of the lowest credit cards that they had seen. They told us it couldn't work. Week 1, we get 50,000 applications. We couldn't cope. 2 call centers, couldn't get through that. In the next few years, we got 4% market share and about 1 million applications from the Australian market. So we got to disrupt and make a real difference. So where does that take me here today? Is back in the innovation space. I think we're back in a place again where we can make true disruptive change, and hence being there. So let me take you on a bit of journey about Ulster Bank. What keeps us going? We asked the question, Jack Welch, famous CEO, he said, if the rate of the change on the outside exceeds the rate of the change on the inside, the end is near. This is what we base innovation on Ulster Bank, and it keeps us going. But there was a new paradigm. The world was changing. Fintechs were outsmarting us, outpacing us. They were doing things that we couldn't do. So another challenge was set out. Simon McNamara from RBS, our CIO, He said he wanted RBS to be the biggest startup in the world. No mean feat, no mean ask. But it wasn't only that, we had to think differently. The bank in the past had thought about 10% increase in profits, 10% decrease in costs. That wasn't going to work. We had to think 10x. We had to change fundamentally of where we'd been. And as you all know, banks did very well. The mindset of banks was to fortify. We built up our assets, we built walls, we defended them, we kept people out, we kept our secrets in. That did us for so long, but it didn't get us where we needed to go. We needed to start to look at creating new opportunities and looking for new growth. So we actually had to set sail and leave the shores that we knew and started looking for something different. And I know this was touched on earlier, and it was about thinking about innovation and entrepreneurship. Where does that fit in an organization? A lot of organizations today, it doesn't fit. We have sales and marketing, we have IT, we have finance. But where does entrepreneurship and innovation sit? In a lot of cases, it doesn't. Now, I don't know if anyone have experienced in here, as part of a very large corporation, we have great antibodies, and antibodies are great things to protect the bank and keep things out. And innovation is seen sometimes like a little bit of a virus, trying to get in there. And I know some of you in here would have heard the terms, can't be done, cost too much, been there before. You probably all heard that, right? That's what you're dealing with. So as a bank, how are we going to change and innovate? A bit like the fintechs. One thing we knew for sure is that we had to leave the mothership. We had to step away, we had to think differently, be differently, and see the world in a different way. So we went out searching across the globe saying, what's happening out there that we're not doing? And one of the key trends was entrepreneurship. It was about allowing the staff internally to start to make difference. So we went out, the largest bank, one of the oldest ones in America, started taking 1% of their revenues and reinvesting it in a VC-style way. They're investing in their ideas and their people. We saw ESB here looking at incubating ideas and creating something different. And then, of course, Google created Area 120. And Area 120 allowed staff to come and pitch their ideas, get funding, and actually deliver them. We knew that also, if we wanted to be different, we couldn't just live in our four walls, the way the bank's looking. We had to embed ourselves in an ecosystem. We had to embed ourselves in an ecosystem surrounded by innovation and surrounded by companies innovating, challenging, doing something different. And we found ourselves the right place being in the digital docklands, surrounded by the likes of Citi, Facebook, Airbnb. And in that journey, we found a company called Dogpatch Labs, which Peter has mentioned, a very innovative company that wanted to create a central platform for entrepreneurship and innovation in Ireland. But we weren't the only ones who saw this. The likes of Alltech, ESB, Pivotal, Google also saw the opportunity to partner and collaborate. So this collaboration placed us in the middle of an ecosystem. So we had to step outside our fortified walls and we had to join everyone else. We joined startups, we joined universities, we joined the number of residents and startups and fintechs that were out there. So the question was, we can work with startups, but the real question was how will we work like a startup? So this is the challenge that we had. So the partnership that we created with Dogpatch Labs was based on 3 key pillars. The first one being on community, that we embedded ourselves in a community where we created trust and advocacy, got to know what was going on out there, supported them. We've had our 5th year of a hackathon where we bring together about 250 developers, business people, where they create and code over an entire weekend and then have their ideas realized in front of the right audience. The other most important one, culture, in which I'll go into further, is actually changing our culture internally. We had thousands of meeting hours and bringing people over, letting them to listen to communities and fintechs and telling their stories about why they made a difference and starting to create that change within the organization. And the third pillar was creating an innovation platform. And that innovation platform was to allow us to create something different and unique in a safe environment. But we had to take it one step further. Kieran Coyle, our MD of retail, said to us, it's about taking a startup culture and making it available to everyone who works at Ulster Bank to accelerate their ideas. Hence, Startup was born. Startup is the first entrepreneurial Irish program that you've seen out here. We know that our staff talk to customers every day. They know the problems. They have their ideas. The question is, how do they bring their ideas to reality? And how are they backed by the business with their voices heard to have this happen for them? Now, I think instead of me talking through it, I'll show you a little bit about what the program looks like.
Last year we launched this program for the first time in Ulster Bank with the support of our partners in Dogpatch Labs. It was the first of its kind in RBS and, we believe, in the financial services industry in Ireland, and it was a huge success.
Startup is an internal incubator program that involves 3 core weeks of workshops and mentoring based here in Dogpatch Labs.
The incubator program is a great way for Ulster Bank to inspire cultural change inside of its organization.
I believe that entrepreneurs can be found anywhere. And at Dogpatch, what we're trying to do is unlock the latent entrepreneurial energy that's within Ulster Bank.
70 ideas generated, 14 staff working throughout the program, culminating in presentations through to RBS execs and Ulster execs. The staff from last year, in terms of personal development, we are seeing people getting promotions, securing new roles. They're really becoming our advocates for innovation in the bank as we strive to become a simpler, safer, customer-centric organisation.
It has been like a roller coaster. It's been exciting, gut-wrenching, challenging. It has awakened an energy in me that both my colleagues and my managers in my daytime job have confirmed is contagious.
This provides you with a safe environment to take an idea and bring it to life, to be like an entrepreneur, to test yourself. And that's been really fulfilling for me from a personal development point of view.
I think the highlight for me has been the freedom to think big. In our day jobs, we're constrained by the regulation, the governance, the environment, and just the freedom that Dogpatch gives you to go out there and think big and look at people who've done the same.
I'd encourage everyone to register for one of the startup events that will be running around the country in the coming weeks. You can also visit the startup group on Workplace and post your ideas, or visit our intranet site and complete a formal application there.
As you'll see there, Patrick Walsh, the MD, and if you're ever down to Dogpatch, pop in and say hello. But I thought it was interesting. He said anyone could be an entrepreneur. What they cut out was even in a bank. We didn't let him keep that. So the program was a structured program. It's part virtual and part physical. We actually take 5 teams, 3 people apiece, and we immerse them. So we take them into 3 weeks off-site, away from the bank, away from their day jobs, and we put them in and let them create ideas. And between those times, we give them 20% time, which they work together, collaborate, and bring their ideas to fruition. Now, I can sit up here and talk about it in a theoretical way, or I can share a real experience. Last year, I was a participant on this program, and this year I'm running it. So for me, I experienced firsthand. So when I went through, I had an idea about helping small businesses. And I wanted to create them with credit much more rapidly. So we combine forces and disrupt the market by engaging with alternative lenders, because the bank doesn't offer everything for every small business. And through my kind of journey through that, I was lucky enough that we got to go to the Innovation Forum in RBS. We were granted the money to see this through. And then we were actually able to, at the moment, we're working through building the platform, and hopefully, fingers crossed, next month, we'll actually have this in the hands of customers, working with accountants to test this new technology. But as part of the program, and why I was able to go through that journey, is we created a live entrepreneurial environment, a different way of thinking. It had a different pace. It had a different openness to what you could do. It also gave you personal ownership. It was your idea. It's not what the bank wanted or what they thought was better or how it fit into strategy. It was your personal idea. You got to own that and drive that through. But most importantly, you weren't left alone. The mentors and ecosystem that we live within Dogpatch was fundamentally important. They linked us to entrepreneurs that had launched massive companies and fintechs that had been there and done that, and they linked us into that so we weren't alone in this journey, and they didn't let us make the mistakes that they made. So we rapidly accelerated our ideas till we could get them to reality. We had a space to unlock our ideas, and most importantly, we were talking about, and I know Jer's not here, but he talked about not having the skills for the future. And when we're in the bank, there's certain skills that we're missing, but part of this program allowed us to unlock really big issues that we have. Pitching, presenting, selling an idea, building a business plan. These are things that were lost in the mix, but we brought them to the fore and give them that development. And I'm happy to say from our alumni last year, out of the entire cohort, 50% have got promotions. So it's worked. And it wasn't only just about chatting and having ideas. This is real core deliverables. They had to do a 5-minute pitch. They had 20 minutes in front of RBS executives and Ulster Bank executives. 20 minutes of hard questioning is not fun. But if you know your stuff, it'll be okay. We developed business plans, financial models. But what was real in the end, we just didn't talk about our idea. We had working prototypes. We had built code that was actually delivering what we said it would deliver. So what did the business say about it? And what did the staff say about it? Well, we had Kevin Hanley from the head of innovation for RBS Group. He said, these are some of the best pitches I've seen along the sides of Silicon Valley. No mean feat in 13 weeks. And we had staff feedback, this is the best program I've ever been on in 15 years. So the question is, that's interesting, but where are you now? Where have you got to with all this? Our innovation has been a journey. We started in our phase 1 of building blocks of innovation. We had to build our blocks to bring people on, to allow them to learn. As we moved up, we moved into the entrepreneurial space, putting the control in the hands of our staff and bringing those teams forward with their ideas. They were frontline to the customers, and they knew the problems and they knew how to solve them. And our next phase is taking that to scale. At the moment, we've had a number of ideas. We've got one that is live in the hands of customers. There's another one just about to come out. So the question is now, once we prove our technology and our ideas and our innovation, how do we scale this? So I'm going to take a little moment to say that we were quite lucky. So this program was happening internally. It was something quite different. And it is sometimes nice to be recognized by industry. So about 2 weeks ago, Deloitte recognized us in the learning category in financial innovation. And the reason why we were identified was that we were actually trying to change the culture. And we're embedding culture and actually making a difference and changing that. But on that journey as well, not only changing innovation, we're actually building a portfolio. We're building a portfolio where there's a number of changes. We've just finished our second incubator this year. We have 10 ideas. And as you can see in the grid, some sit in the transformation space, some sit on core, some sit adjacent. As in true innovation, some will fail fast. Some won't go any further than this, and some will. But this is a space where we're creating a safer environment that you can fail, and you can learn in the journey. So our journey as part of Ulster Bank is that we're creating ambassadors. We're giving them the skills and the tools to go out there. More importantly, they're taking the enthusiasm and the way they think differently and what they've learned. Cultural change is an inside job, and we know this. But with the right people, the right skills, and the right tools, we can lead the way in innovation that will not only be noticed as part of the RBS group, but wider within the industry. I believe that Ulster Bank are placed in a way that they have this. They also have buy-ins from stakeholders to start to change the way that the bank has always thought and start to innovate in a different way. And on that note, I'll finish on that, but I'll leave you with a quote from a famous gentleman that will keep us all on our toes. Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that can adapt to change. And on that, I'll leave you.
Hello, hello, hello. Yep. What do we need with this?
You can put that in your pocket as well.
Oh, right, okay, we go.
Okay.
Okay. Loud and clear. I'm going to knock that over if you leave it there.
Okay, so at this part, it's not necessarily a change of pace, but Alan's going to talk about a global organisation. I think there's been great consistency in the themes that have come up in the national and regional. But now for the next couple of presentations, we're going to look at, as if it wasn't difficult enough to navigate the complex landscape of innovation at a local level, how on earth can you manage it at a global level? Like, no better man to enlighten us than Alan Doherty.
Thanks, Peter. Trying to live up to that big billing. Right, Alan Doherty is my name. I'm Head of Innovation Design in City Innovation Lab, and something's immediately gone wrong with the slides, so that's always a great start. Nope. Any tech support? Hi, Katie. Surprise, surprise. Okay, hold on.
Maybe just do that.
There we go. Easy peasy. All right, we have the technology. Great. So without the aid of a safety net, it's a proper tech demo now. So this is basically, my background. I come from a creative kind of background in advertising and marketing, as Peter well knows. I come through design and digital. And I've only recently, after a long time of working in different kinds of organizations, I've been the last 5 years in City. So not a bank person, not a core innovation person. I do think that innovation is very much an evolution of design and creativity, and you need to have that kind of spark of something different to make innovation work. I mean, there's a lot of talk about innovation frameworks and methodologies and all those kind of things, which I do subscribe to, but at the end of the day, you've got to have that little bit of chemistry that enables you to jump onto the new thing, as opposed to just logically building on and iterating on what's gone before. That's pretty much how I view the thing. So, before I used to always just enjoy being sort of in the middle of business, creativity and technology, which sort of seems to map quite well onto the innovation kind of thing of, is it desirable, is it feasible, is it viable technically and commercially? So, these are transferable skills if you come from lots of different backgrounds, and innovation, I think, to some of the points that were made earlier, it requires a lot of diversity. So, you need people from the business, from the technology areas, and from kind of a creative lens, being able to kind of pull people together and drag creativity out of them, or nurture the little sparks of creativity that spontaneously come up. That's kind of what I see as the innovator's job, or the innovation manager's job. Now, funnily enough, I did kind of start my career in advertising, and it's having that perspective of coming from an industry that has been more or less totally disrupted at this point in time. The only surprising thing from this that I find really shocking actually is that it's from this year, 2019. Digital advertising in the US finally bigger than print and television. I would have thought that was a decade ago, but I don't know how they're measuring it, so one of those internet numbers, But coming from the perspective of a business that's been almost entirely disrupted and changed, talking about print advertising and television advertising, which is almost irrelevant to people coming up now, and consumers of products and advertising aren't relating to those things at all. So, it does give you a little interesting perspective when you talk about things like fintech challengers to large banking organizations. Nobody's immune. Everyone has to change. Things do change, and even enormous industries do get disrupted. This kind of concept that Mr. Zuckerberg likes to bring to things, move fast and break things, is the kind of startup mantra, and everyone wants to be fast, everyone wants to change stuff and bring the new things on. But then, you go to work for a huge global multinational financial services organization, and when they move fast and break things, things break in a really big way. So, disruption isn't always seen as the great thing. You work in a regulated space, and you work with lots of really real tangible things. I mean, I don't know, I'm going to pick on some of the younger folks, the students, and what happens when you can't access Facebook? What happens when Spotify, on the rare occasions that Spotify is down? What happens when YouTube isn't working? That's kind of seen as a fairly big consequence of moving fast and breaking things. They've rolled out a release and it doesn't work. It's a slightly more serious thing if you don't have any money in the ATMs, or people's wages don't go through, or pension payments don't arrive on time. So you've got to kind of work on that basis. When you step up to the large kind of global multinational arena, things don't necessarily scale. The startup mentality is kind of an interesting one, because you've got to absorb some of the lessons of that, but you've got to adapt them to a bigger operating environment. So this is some stuff that was on the website. It's not necessarily set up as the hypothesis, but I pulled it from the event here, and Peter, I guess you wrote this. This is kind of the background to it, that established companies don't have the skills to create new markets. I kind of summarized it down to this, big business can learn to innovate from startups, which I largely agree with. There are lots and lots of things that startups do that are applicable to big business, and lots of techniques and approaches and mindset things that have evolved. But it's not always a linear kind of a thing. Just to give you some context on Citi, because Citi, unlike the folks that you've seen already speaking, Citi isn't a consumer bank in this part of the world anyway. It is in the US. If you go to New York and you walk around the place, you'll see the Citi logo literally everywhere, on bikes, on baseball stadiums and football stadiums and everything. It's a really big logo on the street. It was kind of shocking to me the first time I went to New York. Having started at Citi, I just kind of, wow, work is kind of coming to get me. It's everywhere. It's a really big presence, but not so much here. But Citi's been going for about 200 years. It's in 160 plus countries, and it has about 250,000 employees. Again, those are kind of internet numbers. Roughly speaking, those are correct numbers, but it changes all the time, apart from the 200 years. It's a big organization, and for me, coming from working in the digital space in Ireland and UK mostly, it's a big learning curve. There's a lot of the organization to know, lots of different bits of it, and it's pretty hard to navigate. And then when you try innovating in that context, there are lots of gotchas. So the slide that Carol put up with all of the reasons why innovation isn't going to work, someone's already working on that in part of the organization. That's probably the one that we hear most often, because we are networked into those 160 countries, and it would be kind of shocking if there weren't multiple teams working on blockchain, or multiple teams working on data science, or multiple teams working on enhanced customer experience for credit cards or something. So you trip over lots of other bits of Citi fairly quickly along the process, and that's one of the main gotchas. One of the ways that Citi adopts the startup mindset, well, there are a few bits and pieces to this. Number one, we invest in startups. Citi has a venture wing dedicated to doing that. They're pretty successful at that. They don't necessarily always take financial positions in them for which are going to be massively profitable, but it's more of a strategic investment so that we're aligned and engaged with what is current and new and next. We work with startups as vendors and partners, so if somebody has an interesting fintech, regtech type startup, then we do onboard them. And I think somebody else earlier mentioned how painful that can sometimes be to work at scale with startups, because you're a startup, you're three guys in a basement, and suddenly you've got a guy from risk and compliance asking you for 3 to 5 years worth of financial records, and you don't have them. So computer says no immediately. So you do need to kind of adapt to the realities of working with startups if you want to get to the good stuff of those relationships. We also run internal startup initiatives. That's a kind of a key way that we bring that in, and again, that's very much encouraged by Citi Ventures and a lot of input from them. And we adopt startup methods in a lab context, and that's the bit that I am mostly familiar with. That's my kind of day-to-day bread and butter stuff. The internal startup initiatives are around this. It takes a venture perspective. So again, similar to lots of things that people will be familiar with in corporate world, it's anybody can kind of pitch in an idea, almost anybody, and it's called D10X, which is Discover 10X, and that's familiar if you've been watching, paying close attention. That kind of 10X thing, 10 times the investment in it. It should be the return that you're aiming for. It's stage-gated and deal day driven. So again, the stage-gated approach to innovation is kind of something that will be familiar to people from lots of the literature and the methodology, where you get to a deal day and you pitch essentially for the next level, and they're analogous to kind of venture capital seed rounds. So you get funded to a certain extent, and then you have to prove your case with a limited amount of money, and then they'll sort of eke out another little bit after that, and you get to go a little bit bigger and bigger. All of that is wrapped up in Lean Startup, and Eric Rees, the book cover was on somebody's presentation earlier as well. So I mean, I think, I don't know about the audience, but certainly for the folks who have an innovation job title, we've all been kind of nodding along with one of the slides, kind of going, yep, we do that as well. So there's been a certain kind of a familiarity to it. I guess, you know, we're not all that diverse at all. And then with the internal startup initiatives, I mean, part of the deal is that they get support both from ourselves in the lab and coaching from entrepreneurs in residence who are specific kind of either subject matter experts or just people who are good at managing that specific type of innovation. Our one, the D10X program run by City Ventures, if you Google it, it's been pretty successful. It's won a couple of awards recently for being kind of best in breed, and it seems to be a pretty robust model. The benefit to doing these things isn't necessarily always that somebody who comes up with an internal startup brings it to full commercialization, but one of the kind of side effects of it is that by having the entrepreneurs in residence and the experience of working with the Innovation Lab, you kind of rub off a little bit of the innovation mentality and mindset and approach on people who then, even if the actual initiative doesn't come to live in a separate product stack, at least they've got the experience of how you should think and how you should approach these kind of problems and solutions. So, you know, I think its impact is wider than just the dollar value of the commercial return. So the startup methods that we would deal with in a lab context, again, it's kind of all the same sort of stuff that people have mentioned. It's nothing madly unique. Again, we've had to adapt them somewhat to the size and scale of City, globally very diverse organisation, lots and lots of stakeholders. You know, for example, the customer development one, which is kind of sitting around and talking to customers, the classic kind of book on that is the Steve Blank stuff. If you Google Steve Blank and talk about customer development. But you know, you realize the complexity of City sometimes goes against stuff like that. So if you're developing an app for dentists and you go out and, you know, you talk to 200 dentists, you'll have a pretty good idea whether you're on the right track with the app. If you're doing something which is getting rolled out in 160 countries to large corporates, then you know you could talk to 160 employees of Microsoft and still not get a decent perspective on what the organization actually wants from the product. So, you know, things like stakeholder mapping and buying centers are more important, I suppose, in our equation than they might be if you're shipping stuff direct to consumers. There's maybe a quicker path to a purchase. Somebody either downloads your app or, you know, abandons your mortgage application halfway through if it's not good. But with City, you know, it's a corporate to corporate kind of an engagement that we're dealing with most of the time. So it's a lot longer sales cycle. It takes you a lot longer to know that you've got it wrong. So, you know, that's why it's more and more important that we do the design thinking, break stuff down into small steps and prove each chunk as you go along and bootstrap the whole thing up, because otherwise, you know, the monolithic way that corporations used to build stuff was, you know, it was the sales guy's job to ship the product and make sure that customers used it. You know, it was a sales task and an engineering task to build something amazing. But this idea that you would sit down and validate and check everything with clients before you'd actually invest money in building it and shipping it is kind of somewhat new. The rapid prototyping bit helps, and as part of our team, that's one of the core things that we do, is to get things out in front of clients to test them really, really quickly. And it's been kind of some of our better successes have been when we've kind of undercut a long development process with BRDs and business requirement documents and all those kind of things, and just made stuff as quickly and as scrappily as we could and got it out to customers and made them look at it and work with it and play with it for a while until they broke it. And that's really, really been important. That kind of accelerated development model is something that has had the best resonance for the rest of the business. This is the thing that always kind of hits us. Will it scale? You know, startups are simple, but corporations are complex. So, you know, you look at these kind of incumbent values and startup values. Is it going to scale? And you know, you realize that these are possibly there's a creative tension between these two kind of universes. Everyone's brought it up and alluded to it. You know, you want to kind of break things. You want to build things. You want to build things for the long term. You want things to be really, really quick. But you know, these things are tensions that need to be resolved. You know, I have questions about the kind of startup thing, because when you look at it, I think everyone's got this clear idea that startups are these fast, kind of amazing, sexy digital brands that we all know and love. You know, they're venture backed, they come from Silicon Valley and they build digital products and services. And then, you know, they all have this kind of growth model, which is great, you know, but that, you know, it's to infinity and beyond. But what happens when you get to that bit at the top? You know, what happens? Do they just explode? You know, do they, you know, go and solve real customer needs? But where they have tested the limits of these things, I think, is the stuff that isn't about user experience, the stuff that isn't about the front end. It's not about the app. It's not about the usability. It's not about the software. So if you look at this, bits are easier to iterate than atoms. You can do multiple releases, multiple patches with continuous deployment of new code all the time if you're Facebook. But if you've got to get taxi licenses for a new city that you're going into as Uber, and suddenly the guys won't let you just use everybody's cars without getting regulated by the carriage office and all these kind of things, so suddenly you hit friction. And the same thing with Airbnb. I mean, they're going into towns now and maxing out, and you're seeing kind of local property owners rebelling, and tourist stakeholders getting involved in that kind of thing as well. So global isn't really global is the other message for this, and it's something that we come across all the time with City. Our clients, like the Netflixes, they can't collect money in every country that they can ship product to as easily. So it's not that easy because you don't have the methods of payment. I think that was in somebody's presentation earlier as well. And then regulation doesn't really move at startup speed. So again, if you're Uber or someone, you've got to go in town by town by town and comply with all the different regulations, or Airbnb facing different kinds of state taxes in different regions. That's going to be a challenge to you that isn't going to move at the same kind of speed that all the rest of the software stuff builds up to. And we see that with fintechs and fintech banks as well. And the challenger banks, at the end of the day, I love all these. I use one or two of them. I like the offerings, and they're very, very useful. They solve real pain points for people. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's KBC that you'll be going to, or Ulster Bank, or Irish Life, or whoever, for your mortgage at this point in time, because they're complex products, and it's not as easy for them to do that as it is to get a piece of plastic into your pocket, even if it is a really nice portrait or a see-through piece of plastic. That is the easy bit. I'm not putting them down at all. These are really interesting times, and we like being challenged by these kind of guys. But at the end of the day, these guys here, Swift, probably not that many people in the room are familiar with them unless you work for a financial services organization, but they're really, really vitally important. Go and Google them. They move money in 200 countries around the world on a daily basis, and without them, the kind of global financial clearing system would collapse. So, they're maybe not the most innovative and not the most out there brand in the whole world, but really, really fundamentally important. And it's at that kind of thing that you've got to pull it right back and sort of say, right, where's the dramatic tension between these? So I think what we're ultimately looking at, there's the reframed hypothesis: what can big business and startups learn from each other? There has to be that kind of transfer all the time. So holistically adopting the beginner mindset. One of the things that the challenger banks do really well is they challenge big banks. What are we really for? What's our value proposition? How are we really helping customers? And that can only be a healthy thing. It's like kind of a little boot to the immune system, just to make sure that everybody is performing at their best. And this is what we want to end up with: lifelong learning and the eternal startup mode, where you're always challenging the assumptions, you're always out there, and you're always restarting and disrupting yourself, I guess. So that is me. Happy to take any questions afterwards at the panel talk.
Rachel comes from Deloitte and now Ernst & Young, and has been working in innovation as an innovation lead in many different companies, and can sort of abstract that to a level of the consulting thing about how to mediate innovation for companies that are struggling with precisely how to do it. She's going to be fantastic.
Amazing. I'm actually multi-local. I'm not global at all. No.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, welcome aboard.
Okay, thanks. So now, where do I get my deck on? Hold on. Yeah, so as Peter said, my name is Rachel Cork and I work with EY. So I, just by way of background, I too have I studied in NCAD visual communications, so creative background. So it's my zeitgeist, because design thinking and all things innovative, I can work in corporate organizations now, which is great. So I started out when I graduated, I worked for a lot of digital media companies, and that's, like, I know you won't believe this, but it was when digital was only beginning. So like, it was kind of cutting edge, technology at the time. So working with a lot of kind of large organizations, both here in the UK. And then I went on to work for different software companies. So they were actually fintechs and startups, even though the word fintech hadn't actually been coined at the time. So we were developing software for different financial institutions, and I believe some of the software that we developed is still in Bank of Ireland at the moment. I met somebody last year and they've no idea how it works, so they can't get rid of it. So it's fundamental to the day-to-day, but it was on the whole multi-channel banking side. And the guys then who had set it up, actually it was a really successful venture. I think it sold for 130 million, to which was a lot of money then, to Siebel and then Oracle. So I went through into the corporate world, and then the guys had set up another new company, which I went and worked for them again. So it's called the Conversation Hub, Iconic. So that was really on the front end of, so I suppose coming from that side of things, I could really see, what was the essence of a startup and the challenges. And I think, somebody was talking earlier about being too soon. And the last company I was with, I think they were nearly too soon for so long. And it's so hard for fintechs and startups, because you can have a brilliant idea, but the industry, because you're ahead of your time, they're not actually ready for you yet. So you have to wait and wait, and your investors are getting fed up and whatever. So, so it is challenging from that side, but then you can really see, I suppose, the pioneering mindsets. And, as we all know, the fintechs are really looking at the niche areas of opportunity within the marketplace. So then I went on to move into professional services. So I'm with EY at the moment, and people kind of go, how are you creative background and you work for an accounting firm? But they actually do advise you in different things. So it's not creative accounting, as loads of people have a great joke with me about. So accounting and me do not mix, or Excel spreadsheets. But yeah, so I suppose I can see we would work with a lot of EY, the large organisations, and banking and insurance, and I've also worked a lot in the media because I have a media background, and so like the likes of RT or whatever, but like big organisations that really struggle to be innovative. So I'm coming at it from both sides, and I think that's where my presentation will have a look through to see what how you can capture the essence of a startup, and then what the challenges of big organizations are. So in EY, we always say, asking the right questions. And like I was talking to the guys earlier, that, the right questions are actually really, really simple ones. It's like why, and then what, and then how. So I think one of actually the, in big organizations, one of the things you really need to ask is why not? Because when you ask the why and the what, but then, you're going, we always do it this way, and we did it this way before, but it's like, why not do it differently? Why not do it this way? So the why not. So I'm going to bring you through some of these questions here. Now, I know I'm the last speaker up, and I was saying, I hope there's something that I can say that's new, but it might be actually serve as a summary to what's been said before. And if you have your bingo card out of innovation jargon, you can fill it in my speech. So I don't know if this plays, does it? I don't know. Hold on, I'll see. Hold on. Oh. You can see I'm very technical after coming from a software background. Will it play? It doesn't really need to play, but hold on. My lovely assistant.
Yeah.
No, okay, it doesn't. Okay, well, basically it was somebody blinking an eye, and there was all these lovely things that, oh, no, hold on, go back. So now it's on autoplay. So yeah, it was basically why innovate, because when, from the time that we've been in this room, from the time even before we'd hit the first break, there was so many startups that came and went, because things, you start up and, they can very quickly go. New technologies have been invented. So it's really that the world is moving very, very fast. And as we're sitting in here, and as big, large organizations, if we don't take the opportunity now, somebody's going to catch and eat our dinner, as somebody was saying, and the dessert and whatever else. So why innovate? Yes, as I was saying, so it's already, disruption is happening inside and outside the industry. And so just say for financial services, it's happening within there, but also on the outside, because customers' expectations are being shaped outside of all of our organizations. So like Netflix, things are being served up to you, from using personal segmentation, so they get to know me, they know what I want, they're giving me back to me all the time. So like even for financial services, why do you not know me more? Why can't you tell me what the best products are for me? I shouldn't have to be going looking for things. So tomorrow another competitor will be targeting your customers, and there's the whole GAFA bank thing with Google, Amazon, Facebook. So it's not even the people that you think are your competitors now, they're going to be different tomorrow. Your customers are changing quicker than you are. And then also disruption it's because it's change, there's an opportunity there. So why not take that opportunity and use it to your advantage? And start now to create the organisation of the future. And that comes into the whole kind of employee capability, your way of working. And then on the employee engagement, from my experience, like creating an innovative mindset and that kind of acceptance of change, like saying you can fail, is actually really, really beneficial to a company's culture. So just we did a recent, and people can look it up online, but on the FinTech survey, Ireland is actually 7th in terms of the FinTech adoption. So, and that's globally, so that's really high. So like we're not just talking on a global level, like Ireland is actually really picking up on the whole the FinTech space. And then if you look at one website there, so that's HSBC. And you can see just as an example of where the fintechs are taking out in kind of those niche areas. So like whether it be payments or lending or, communications, transactions. So they're all targeting like those specific areas. And then this brings us into the whole new ecosystem that, banks can avail of rather than developing things from the inside. And I know they can, but, you can align with other fintechs, and that does bring its own opportunities. I hope you're not going to say 3 minutes now, are you? Because I feel like I've already started. Okay. So what is innovation? So I thought there's been very little talk of technology here. So you think what's innovation? People are going to talk AI, robotics, whatever. And it is those things, but really, it's the blend of the human and the technology. So we have on the technology side, you can take different approaches. So you can have what's the business need, and it should be driven by that. Or as some of the other organisations like Citi have innovation hubs for experimentation, and like the largest, so IBM or whatever, they're going to have like loads of money invested and just kind of let's try, and then see what's viable. And then so are an ecosystem with technology partners. And then on the human side of things, it's very much on the culture, capabilities and mindsets. And I think where I'm coming from is like I have a creative background, as does Carl, but sorry Alan, so we have creative backgrounds, so we kind of maybe have problem solving, thinking outside the box, blue sky thinking, whatever else you want to say, but it's like how do you help an organisation to be innovative and to teach that. And I do actually think you can get there in some regard. So on the human side as well, if you're doing things to people, there's not going to be very much acceptance. So it's to try and bring people along on the journey, as Carol was saying earlier. So and accepting the new technologies, because a lot of new technology programs are brought to here and then forget about all the people that have to use it. So it's having the new ways of working, and then empowerment and ownership. So before I went and looked at why, how to innovate in large organisations, I looked at why innovation fails in large organisations, and that's kind of from my startup fintech background as well. And the way I see it is, I like the burning platforms, burning desires analogy. So your burning platforms, and to date really has been very much on the regulatory space. And so for example, 60 to 80% of technology spends in large organizations is usually on regulatory, because they have to do it, because the regulators are increasingly more digitally enabled and looking for more information. So, but then there's the burning desires. So it could be better, improved customer satisfaction. It could be, better interfaces with the customers, whatever that is. But ultimately, so now with open banking, people are now looking towards what was the burning desires soon becomes their burning platform, because now they have to look at the front end, they have to look at how they're going to interface with their customer. So just, I'm not going to go through all of this, but why it can fail. I know there's there's hubs and they're different. But sorry, on the day-to-day, business takes priority, the management's commitment may be lacking, the innovation is something new, and then people don't often like something new. And then also it's not called out as a measurement, and I think that would be key. So I think just to summarise, it's really the capabilities, the culture, the methodologies and the motivation within the organisation, and I'll come to those now. So just before I drill down to those, there's like the organisational levers, and I said, and it's been said before, that culture is huge. C-level sponsorship is also extremely important, and it won't, innovation or nothing really will happen without that. The aligning and orientation, and I see it like a lot, that different parts of the organisation are working at odds with each other. So it really has to come from the top and everybody to be aligned on it. Measurable, so if you have a measurement, so within an organisation that one of your SLAs, your service level agreement is you have to do this by this amount of time, but actually you're not creating space for innovation, well then you're never going to be innovative. So you need to have a look at your measurements. And then on the behaviour, and the behaviour again comes from the top. Both C-suite and your executive committee have to demonstrate the behaviours that you want the rest of the organisations. So if they're always saying, we always do it this way, just do it that way, everybody else is going to do that. So you need to demonstrate those behaviours. So in terms of setting up for success, and again, this is not about the hubs, it's just within the entire organisation. So make sure it's aligned with business strategy if it's part of your value and your purpose. So empowers staff, and I think staff empowerment and ownership is really key, because if you have a great idea, and a company I worked with recently, we were looking to simplify across the organisation. So we're looking for loads of ideas of how to simplify, but nobody knew who owned this part of the process, who to go to. So it's never going to get anywhere. Creating a community as well within the organisation. So if you have things that are community based, work better. That's why the credit unions always work so much better than banks. So no, just in customer experience, that's all. There was just a survey done today, and they came out better. So the managing change, look, I'm not going to go through all of this, and then it's kind of how do startups succeed. So again, smaller, less hierarchical, internally well connected. Again, the collaboration's been talked about an awful lot here. And then, so the cultural factors, like more risk appetite. Just one thing I will call out here is on the controls, where I see that, again, highly regulated organisations, they have to have, they've built up this culture of controls, and sometimes I see that it's over control, that there's too many there. And actually, if you did an assessment in an organisation of the controls that were there, a lot of them aren't necessary, and it's stopping the organisation being simplified and also being agile, because every time you do something, you've got to talk to so-and-so in compliance, you've got to talk to, no, you have to do this, and you have to run this by the review board or whatever. And oftentimes it's not necessary, it's just there because, for legacy reasons. So just some innovative techniques again on the change should be experienced, not managed. So I'm not going to go through all this, I'm sure we'll share the slides afterwards, 3 minutes. And then the fail fast to learn. So if that's on, because everybody's talking about failing fast. And then going and doing. Again, with the recent project that I did, we were very keen to demonstrate the benefits and that we were actually going to do things with the innovative ideas that were gathered. So we gathered them through an innovative interface, people were able to see them, and then we were able to say, okay, this, and communicating that back out, because people need to see that you're actually going to do stuff about it. So this is just an example of how you can create an internal ecosystem. So, and this is again something that I had put together for one of the firms that I was working with. And so it was an innovation hub that was part of the organization. So it had a strong leader at the center that had just like me or Alan or whoever, but had those kind of innovative capabilities, and what they needed to do was go and bring the capabilities throughout the rest of the organizations up. So they did that through bringing the capabilities up. They created a community with a hub and spoke. So again, you need to bring the rest of the organization along with you, and if you have a hub and spoke that you are involving one person from each of the different departments in that community, you bring them in, you teach them the methodologies, the techniques, and then they go back out into the organisation. They've experienced the benefits, they know what to do, and they can go back into the organisation. One of the key things I found was the steering, because it was we had the CEO on the steering, because this was one of his projects, and that overcame any silos, because you can find somebody in finance is again somebody in digital, whatever. You need a cross-functional team as part of the steering. And then on the motivation as well, so motivating the right behaviours and the reward. Now motivation takes two types. It can be reward or can be penalties or KPIs, so you have to do it, but you'll be rewarded for doing it. So and then in terms of the methodologies then as well. So creating a set of artifacts that the rest of the organisation can use as they go on. So just in terms of then some organisations, because with the legacy systems and I suppose legacy capabilities, are looking at setting up a new co. So this is where they would actually be a completely separate entity to the organisation and drive out new propositions very quickly. I suppose some of the benefits of that, it's been minimum IT investment and no legacy systems, minimum controls, very flat structure, agile, and then the speed to market is very quick. But then the question is, what happens to the larger organisation? And then how do you bring the key functions with you? Because you will need compliance or finance at some stage. And you say, oh, I need you now. And they say, no, you didn't come to us 6 months ago. You know, you can go it yourself. And then in terms of the customer data and contacts. So this is where people are looking at this. I haven't seen it done successfully yet, but the idea would be that the smaller organisation would eat the bigger organisation ultimately. So just to finish up then, so how it benefits. So creating an innovative mindset within the organisation. So if you give people asking the right questions, asking why not, saying, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? Who do you go to solve it? You will actually simplify the organisation. And like there's so many complexity. And what I said actually at my recent engagement was that people have been extremely innovative because they thought of these outlandish workarounds to the work. Like they wanted to get the work done and they were really innovative because, well, we'll do it this way and we'll go around and we'll do this and whatever. And like, you know, they weren't able to get a straight path through. So they're very innovative in coming up with that. So, and like they are already being innovative, but just get them innovative for the right purpose. It does give you a capability uplift. I think in terms of agility, if you wanted to bring a new product or proposition to market tomorrow, you're going to be further along the road than you would be otherwise. Your improved NPS, you're going to have better customer experience scores. Your employee NPS, so a better employee engagement. And then I think a culture, because, you know, like for getting new staff in the future and for retaining the staff that you have, I think it's it's definitely going to have like an impact on all of those things. So that's it for me. So I hope I didn't repeat myself too much. So thanks.
So thanks a million, Rachel. Frank.
Oh.
Wow. Welcome along. So we just like to introduce our final speaker, Frank from IBM.
Yeah, thanks. I'll make a timer. Okay, does it play video as well? Like YouTube link? This is a YouTube link. It doesn't play, right? It's okay.
You could probably, you can like go on, I can put the link on now if you want.
Okay, let me see, yeah. Does it work? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll give it a try, yeah, thanks. We start now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Frank. It's quite big there. Everybody can see it. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm not happy to. Well, I'm kind of surprised. I'm the last one, which is the hardest, I know, because everybody speaks really well. Sitting back there was really enjoying it. I'm the only person probably from a technical background, so I've been in software engineering development throughout my career in the past 20 years. I became one of the IBMer in 2006 through a FileNet acquisition. So it's another American company. So we are specialized into enterprise content management, and we sell product to banks, insurance companies, etc. And so without taking too much time by myself, I'm going to dive into IBM's perspective on the innovation. How does it work? Okay. Yeah, so the few different numbers here. As IBMers, we're always proud of that. We are a big company, we are large, and we have long history. So 1911 was the company when it was first set up. So over 100 years. it's ancient. It's like you look at a tree with kind of this big, massive company. And when I first joined the company in 2006, because FileNet was a much smaller company, I could feel, innovation is different. Because like this lady, pretty lady mentioned there, a large company has a lot of bureaucracy, so it's hard to go through a lot of new ideas. But throughout the history of IBM, I could see that there have been a lot of transformations. For example, in 1911, who knows IBM was first making manufacturing or building? Anybody can guess? I'm no treat though. So okay, I'll answer myself. So IBM actually first created clock and punch cards. They're kind of when they start the business. So it's nothing about computers, and then they start to evolve over time. I'm not going through all the numbers, but I'm going to pick the interest, what interests me. So 2011, I guess you all heard of Watson, the artificial intelligence. Yeah. So it's actually the moment when everything changed. So IBM has been, doing well and not so well, not so well. It's like a lot of the PowerPoints kind of going like this, stock going up and down, up and down. There's lack of new ideas. So Watson was really the first time using innovation. So set up a goal that's doable, and then achieve that. So from that jeopardy, and then everything happened just naturally. And another one I want to mention is 2018, last year. Anybody know what happened to IBM last year? It spent $34 billion to buy a company called Red Hat. So that's super, it's just the amount of money that IBM is willing to contribute to new ideas and to expand the rapidness of the innovation or the rapidness of the technology that's changing. Later on, I will touch different topics. So one of them is Watson, so artificial intelligence. Another topic to touch is on the multi-cloud. So what IBM set that into 2 chapters. So first chapter is digital transformation. It's for companies who has been using traditional way to, there's nothing into the digital format. So transformation is the first step to chapter 1. Chapter 2 is about connectivity. So that's why IBM bought $34 billion to buy a big company called Red Hat to enable the multi-cloud environment. So, okay. In this slides, we will roll back the time when IBM was in 2011 minus 6, that's 2005, okay. 2005, when Watson, that idea come up. So it spent 6 years to build that system. So at the time when it started, it was nothing special. It just say, okay, we want to invest into AI, and it's hard to to set a goal or to make an artificial intelligence that really stand out. And you can do AI in, for example, smart toilets or smart handsets. They are all small, but where could be something that's achievable? So Jeopardy is the American program. It's kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but it's different in a way that in American it's a lot of speech. So it's nothing on typing and anything. It's about speech. And you can choose the question you want. If your time you spend, you can watch that program. So basically, the challenge is that we want to make a computer that understands human language. So at the time it was English. Now IBM Watson speak 12 different languages, but at the time only English. So how does that understand interact with people just with human language without keying anything, without typing? And also how what in the innovation of Watson, what kind of value can you take? For example, when they answer questions, how to make that answer more accurate, the algorithm behind. So it's a lot of semantic, a lot of technology, a lot of ideas behind this to make that artificial intelligence. So this, I'm not sure. Is it playable or? Yeah. Okay. No sound, right? Okay.
How Watson answers a question in 4 not so simple steps. The first person mentioned by name in The Man in the Iron Mask is this hero of a previous book by the same author. This is a typical Jeopardy clue, presented in the tricky Jeopardy format that can be pretty difficult for a person to understand, much less a computer. Remember, a computer understands code, ones and zeros, not nouns and verbs or people and places, let alone the relationships between them. Watson can't see or hear, so audio and visual questions are off limits, but everything else is fair game. And of course, it's impossible to know everything. As Alex Trebek often quips, the hardest Jeopardy question is the one you don't know. How does a computing system reach a single answer to clues posed in human language? Unlike traditional databases designed for computers, real language is implicit, ambiguous, and full of complexity.
Or
That's one of the
I can
reasons
just
why,
skip the
until
video.
now, computer
Yeah,
searches
skip it.
only spit out documents filled with keywords. It's been a
Okay, yeah, probably it's hard to hear it. This video is open to public, so you can do a search on that on YouTube. You'll be able to see the video. You just type science behind the answer, or type Watson. You can see this. Basically, what that video wants to show is that it's when Watson was starting, within that 6-year period, with that 6-year journey, how to create a artificial intelligence that understands human talking. And then it's not easy when we speak, making a sentence. It has to make this machine to understand what's a subject, what's a verb, and how to, sometimes we can say slang, how that slang become meaningful to a machine. So it's a lot of semantic, a lot of, we call NLP, natural language processing within the machine. So IBM spent so much time, so much effort. Yeah, 6 years was a long investment to it. But it's not just it. So innovation kind of grow from a dot, and then you join different dots together and making something special. And what happened after that? Like there was a previous speaker also mentioned about there's a huge drive now in technology. So everything become possible. A lot of impossible, like for example, human genome, it's already been finished. So we can use genetic to predict, or even to understand what medicine can be specific for a specific person. And also for banking-wise, security-wise, blockchain used to be impossible because blockchain will kind of grow over time. We don't have that much space. Who want to invest that money? But because of the cloud make everything happen now. So does anybody know blockchain or heard of blockchain? Yeah. So blockchain, in a nutshell, it will grow. It's a data that will grow. It has an identity within itself. For example, if you buy a diamond, for example, diamond is more expensive. If you buy a diamond, you want to know where the sources come from. So blockchain is perfect for that because every buyer bought the diamond will encrypt it. And programmer like myself, I can't decrypt it. So everything is encrypt over encryption. So you know the history. So it's perfect using for food industry and different industries as well. I know blockchain this year, 2019, this year, it was keynote from Hyundai Card. It's a South Korean company. Also, you apply the Watson to help them with the banking. So he was saying, nowadays, the young generation, they don't like to talk to people. They don't want to ask questions anymore. They like texting. So that their bank using Watson as the artificial intelligence behind the phone, and anytime they could just type a question, okay, what kind of policy entitlement do I have? So everything answered back within text. And that Hyundai car become one of the biggest company in Korea now. Within 3 years, I think, for them to transform their banking system. So we did, okay. IBM has been a company that's not just creating product itself, it's often partnering with different industries to help business to drive, to make them innovate better. And by doing so, IBM has come up with a framework. Let's see. So we kind of summarize that into 3 different perspectives: the organization itself, and the culture, and the process to make that happen. So within, I'm only going to touch the very basic stuff. from the company perspective is if there's business, or if you are a business, or if you're a business owner, or if you work for a company, or if you want to start up a company, you're welcome to come to IBM to engage with our specialists. So there is a Think Lab in IBM that welcome all different sectors to come and then partnering or to come up with new ideas to create. The innovation within the organization itself, so within the framework, it kind of structure everything from the starting point. What does the company need from organization itself to making judgment of the resources that they have. For example, if your company only have 10 people, and if you have 100,000 in your statement, and you're not going to invest something that not really relate to your business. So that's more the framework is making the company partner to be more focused on what they should or the direction that they innovate, and also a dedicated team should be created for within the company. And they talk about the culture. Again, culture is basically for all the employees to be encouraged, not to be closed up. Ideas that work better if it's opened up, if you share, you can come up with all different kind of things. And agile, that was being mentioned earlier as well. So nowadays, it's not about think well and then think through thoroughly and create something. It's about open up quickly, because otherwise some other company has created the same thing, which you'll be replaced. The process will be the combination of the both to tie everything together. So it's not about having a great idea only. You have to about the funding as well, and how to make the money coming, repeated. IBM within the system itself, using cognitive, it could tell you what kind of area you can invest more and what kind of area you can reduce to create benefits. So over the years, IBM has created a framework for innovation. So basically, it's a framework that's to help businesses, whether the size of big or small companies. So Jimmy mentioned, that's repeating what the slides earlier. Okay, yeah. So within this slide, I just want to mention about the innovation. So innovation works better if you don't have to work on your repeating the work that you do every day. So basically, letting the artificial intelligence to do your mundane job, and then you can have more time to look at what's important. Okay, these are basically different benefits that IBM can bring to your business. And again, with our CEO, we mentioned like IBM is one of the most diversity business that embrace different perspective, and that gives the innovation grow within the company. So I just want to close. This is my last slide now. Innovation ecosystem. So innovation is not an event; it's a process. So to our view is that it's great to invent something. You can invent one thing, and then what's next? So the most important is if you look at the process like a tree, and if you look at the innovation, this tree is to make nutrients. I don't know anybody like plants. I love plants. So like a tree can grow fruits, an apple tree, etc. But if you only aiming to grow apple, that's not good enough, because the tree need nutrients. So the process is making the right kind of nutrient for the plants for it to grow. And so that's my end of the slides. That's it. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thanks a million. Listen, we have a little sort of panel because all of you have been immensely patient. I'm sure you have loads of questions that are pent up that you want to ask the group. So could I ask the pretty gentlemen and ladies to maybe 4 on this side and 4 on this side, wheel your chairs around, face the music. Is that okay? Do you mind? And I don't know if the room really needs a mic. Do you think it needs a mic? Yeah, no. Okay, sorry, I think it was extraordinary, some of the common themes that came up. And it's invariably the case with innovation around about people and culture and how there are so many antibodies inside an organization. And the biggest job in some cases is to move something through the organization itself. I'm going to, well, hang on, who's got a question they'd like to ask? Now this should be different. In first years, if you said that, there would be this sort of mid-witch cuckoos of people staring straight ahead into the middle distance, pleading internally, hoping that they would no attention would be drawn towards them. But with you should be storming the stage. You should be doing cartwheels up the middle and dying for a little bit of airtime. But I have one question. If I might start with one question, is that all right? But then I want full engagement. Oh, there is a question. Sorry, this gentleman here.
Question in corporate life. There's typically a blame culture. How do you move to a culture where people are allowed to fail without serious career consequences?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be standing here as an academic. But let me. Who has anybody got an answer to that?
I mean, I think I maybe one of the talkers might have mentioned it or certainly alluded to it. Can we hear me anyway? I think you probably can. Is that right? Oh, okay, fine. Certainly we alluded to it anyway. I think it's that creating that culture where firstly you reward the idea, and frankly the whether that idea becomes productionized or not is almost secondary, and it's a matter of rewarding the sorts of behaviors that you want to see. Certainly from a KBC perspective, I mean, we want those ideas no matter how sort of wacky and out there they are initially. Yeah, sure, I mean, the vast majority of them won't be productionized, and some of them might be seen in some respects as downright heresy. However, you really do need to create that environment where people are rewarded just for the idea, and as I said, whether that's productionized or not is entirely irrelevant, really.
Sure. In Minnesota, it's covered with posters, and it might say, here's David, he had an idea that cost us $20 million. We nearly turned a profit on it, but not quite. And they lionize or make heroes of the people whose ideas didn't quite make it. And those of you who read Fast Company, they had a cover feature of a woman who's a leading clinical researcher in Pfizer, retiring 35 years, a very high-level career, and none of the projects she worked on ever got launched. Some of us might think that woman was jinxed, but she was there as a sort of a facilitator that was the catalyst for great innovation. But to your question, how do if you do deliver a lemon to the organization and they invest a lot of time in it, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, well, I think at part of the decision-making process, the senior level has to have some involvement. So, and it's like, what's the risk appetite, and just accepting that, so I was reading an article at the weekend about, like, in Silicon Valley, you're nobody unless you failed, because like failure can be an opportunity. And I think the most important thing is to learn how you're going to do it differently. And then also what I see is there's a lot of zombie projects in organizations. So instead of just walking away, like all these zombies walking around, you say, kill them off, let's move on to something new and stop turning our attention to that. Because like, I think it's like the sunken loss. So sink your losses and move on, rather than just keeping them alive just because you've invested 100 grand or whatever in it, and it's never going to yield results. So I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think you're right about it's moving away from the blame culture, because if you look in the corporate world, your objectives are sitting around success. this many, this high. They're all the objectives set around this. We've recently looked at our entire, what we're looking at, the core critical people capabilities. And we've changed that fundamentally. We've just changed that this year. And one of the highest ones that we don't have is innovator connector. And we found that we rate very low in finding these people are innovators and connectors, because we talked about collaboration a lot today, and that's something we need to do much more of. So we're actually changing the skills that we need, and then we're embedding it back into the culture. So we're now hiring on those, but we're also watching people and monitoring on those. So it is a cultural change, and I don't think we're there yet, and I think we have a journey to go, but I think it takes everyone to start to make this change and start to see how this works.
Okay. Any insights on
Yeah, Frank.
Hi, for the blaming culture, I see a lot in IBM actually. Especially not long ago, we sold Lotus. Lotus was one of the oldest. Yeah, Lotus Notes. Yeah, and also same time, and we actually adapt using Cisco instead. But we have a verse. So IBM verse is a more intelligent mailing system within IBM. So within a technology company, innovation or new stuff coming all the time. So if you keep on, a lot of people maybe like the traditional, or Lotus is better, but you're losing customer, and the customer doesn't want that anymore, even though, so management level decision is important. So just get rid of it, start a new one. People complaining, just let them know. So brainwash is another thing. So philosophy is, innovation is hard to push, but making it as a philosophy would be much easier for people to digest. So I think from the up-down level as well, to let the people know that blaming isn't going to solve the problem. So, all right, thanks.
I think there's a false equivalence between as if it was failure here or success, as if that was the choice. That's not the choice. It's between failure or hiding failure in your organization. So like actually acknowledging failure is a success for the organization. And there's pioneers out there in organizations who are pushing this through, and there will be people who will want to just blame, and as in life, there's nothing you can do about that. But I think cultures are changing, but cultures take a long time to change. So.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, hi.
Hello. I just had a general question for the panel. There's been lots of discussion around diversity and inclusion and the importance of those elements in supporting great culture. Ryan spoke about some of his team when they were prototyping various solutions. They weren't the right fit, but a group of people didn't say anything, and 3 weeks later it all blew up. How do you ensure that introverts' ideas are heard as loudly as extroverts, and how do you encourage a culture to make that happen?
Please do.
Yeah, so we recently ran a series of workshops, and it was again on this simplification program, which was using innovative techniques to simplify. And what we could see, I think you have to be very reactive or responsive in like just say in the workshop environment or something, and allow those voices to be heard, because what we saw that a lot of the quietest people in the room actually had the best ideas, but if they were in an open environment, they wouldn't speak up. So we broke it very quickly into groups, and we'd kind of try to wean it out of them or whatever. And as well, when management was in the room, also we were actually just talking about this at the break. So we put the managers in a separate group because just to hear those voices, because again, they weren't able to speak up. So I do think you have to create mechanisms to be able to hear those voices, because they have excellent ideas, and you need to hear them.
Yeah, I'd love to take a cut at that as well. I mean, I think for me, the benefit of design thinking and those kind of techniques, those kind of frameworks, is working with multidisciplinary groups and getting to hear from everybody. It allows you a forum to bash people together. Sometimes, if you've got an idea and you're working with the sales organization, you're working with legal and compliance, you're working with coders, completely different styles of introverts and extroverts, and strong personalities and people who are more shy and retiring. And that's when you really need a good facilitator. You need to run good workshops. You need to kind of get all of the kind of templates and props and pull everything out of the bag in terms of how you structure those workshops and get the information and synthesize the wisdom of the crowd, as opposed to the people who are either most senior or most forceful or most extroverted in standing up and pushing their ideas. So I think that's where we've seen the greatest successes. Design thinking is not a magic bullet for everything. It's a kind of a trendy buzzword and framework, but done properly, a multidisciplinary workshop that pulls together people and makes sure that everyone is heard. That's why you do, time-bound exercises. That's why you do lots of voting and clustering, so that everyone gets to see everybody else's idea. They all get the airtime. So that for me is important at the event level. At the wider level, I think it's important from an organizational point of view that the innovators are kind of go out and drag in diverse perspectives as well. And you actively kind of champion diversity. And diversity can take lots of forms. I mean, I've been at quite a lot of diversity events where it's about the obvious things, ethnic diversity or, male-female, gender balance, those kind of things. But, coming from a creative background, as does Rachel, working in a financial services organization, sometimes that can be weird, and that's a kind of type of diversity in itself. It's not necessarily just about the obvious things about your personal background or any of that. It can be very challenging to be a kind of a words and pictures person in a numbers organization. So you kind of, as the innovator in the room, it's your kind of job to make sure you've got a good mix in the room around your idea, and that you built your team from diverse standpoints.
Great question, because yes, sorry, the lady back.
Hi. I wanted to know, when we talk about innovation labs in a corporate setup, how do we ensure that there's a personal ownership of idea which continues as the idea flows through the organization, especially in a larger organization?
Well, that's very interesting topic. But often when ideation is separated from innovation, the kernel of the idea can be dissipated or can be interpreted in a different way by the person that takes the baton. That's what you're getting at, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Great.
Yeah. So sometimes it's really important. There are other times when it's less important, and I think it's down to the individual who's come up with the idea to actually drive that themselves. One example I might give is when we were in the HSE, we realized that it was really a challenge for people to kind of step away from their day job and move into, creating a new idea and bringing it forward. So we created a budget for people to be covered out of their day jobs to bring an idea forward for a period of typically about 3 months. And if it gained enough traction in that time, then we would look at their wider position and, where that could bring them forward. Or if they didn't want to bring it forward, that budget could instead be used to pay for, say, development of that idea or someone else to bring it forward. So you do have to create these little pathways for success for people. But you do also need to understand, does this person have the skill set to bring it forward? What kind of supports do they need? So there's no one pathway on that. There is a wider conversation to have with each idea that comes forward, saying, is this for you? Is this how you want to progress your career? But then also, can you be the one that progresses this? And I think that goes on an individual basis.
Now, really only time for one, maybe two more questions.
I'm the lucky one, am I? So I suppose it's a little bit linked to that last idea. Thinking of, you mentioned innovation hubs and incubators and people getting out of the day-to-day in order to drive ideas and come up with a plan. When it loops back into the main part of the organisation, if it isn't being driven by the person who had the idea, so if it's being brought back into other departments to be brought forward by somebody else, how do you keep the momentum going? When that same passion might not be behind it, and then how does that loop back into the innovation hubs or incubators so that people see, I suppose, what's happening with their ideas and their motivation going?
I might kick it off, if you don't mind. Metrics are really important on that. So unless you have measurables of success within an innovation lab, then you're not going anywhere. So if someone's been allocated as a project leader of an idea to bring it forward, you've got to measure the success of that in terms of how they're bringing it forward. acknowledging there will be failure, but someone has to have responsibility for bringing things on, and you want them to do that to the best of their ability, to the point where, yes, it probably will affect their career if it doesn't go ahead. So they're definitely motivated to bring forward.
Just another point, I suppose, is senior sponsorship. So what we would do, and I've seen it work and I've seen it not work as well, is but if you have senior sponsorship for an idea or for an initiative from outside of the innovation centre, and then you have to report on a weekly basis, show them what you're doing, and make that an open forum so anyone can come, including the sponsor, including the person who maybe might have had the original idea, and you're essentially reporting back to them. They're your board in that circumstance, and that certainly creates an ownership and a sort of a two-way conversation between the hub and the wider organisation.
One question. What's your experience in, if you're working in a team or a group or project group, do you find equal levels of creativity, or do you ever find cases where individuals are then some high or some very low creativity, or does that present an issue?
So I think on any team there, you wouldn't take the same levels of creativity, but I think if you have somebody who has strong influencing skills that can bring the rest of the team and motivate them. Because really, like, you know, if you're looking at innovation, it's like why, and looking for solutions and being very focused on what's the problem. So really, it's that kind of, you know, thinking through.
I think it's about diversity. Creativity is only one component of what you need to actually deliver something. So I think it's important if you have someone who has strength in creativity, but you look at a lot of other factors, because if you brought an entirely creative team, you probably wouldn't succeed. And it's about difference in thinking, different skill sets, and that's what brings it along. So creativity is only one component, but there's plenty of others that you'd need to have.
Okay, well, I did a PhD in innovation, or corporate innovation. It wasn't half as good as listening to the insights and the wealth of experience and expertise and enthusiasm. But I just want to ask one question, because I think I did notice everybody taking note of something somebody else said. So if I could start with you, Alan, my question is either A, did you photograph a slide somebody used, or did you take, what are you taking away? Because I think we've all learned an enormous amount. I've been involved in this area for quite some time. I've learned a huge amount. What were you stealing from this afternoon?
Yes, I did photograph slides, and I probably will plagiarise a couple of them at some point in the future, yeah. I'd have to kind of go the opposite direction with that. The one thing that I thought was actually interesting, and I called it out, was the amount that the innovation folks were all kind of nodding along with one another's presentations. I thought that was striking to me. You work very much in large organizations as the innovation person, as the kind of the rebel, you know, the person that nobody wants to listen to, and to an extent that's in your job description, that you're supposed to be the person that raises things that nobody else wants to raise. It can be tough, and it can require a lot of personal resilience, you know, so it is not for the faint-hearted to be in the boardroom in a very powerful kind of corporate setting, telling the guys that they're doing it all wrong, you know. So you know, you need to bring evidence, and you need to back it up, and you need to kind of bring justify your creativity. So for me, I thought that it was really interesting that, you know, there is methodology, there's method in the madness, there are methodologies and techniques that are common across, whether it's a very large global kind of organization like City or the more local organizations, that, you know, people are having success with the same kind of approaches, the same kind of techniques. And for me, that was interesting. I think thanks to Peter for getting us all together in the same room and bashing our heads together. I think, you know, there's probably a strength in numbers, and you know, rather than maybe forming a support group, maybe we could do something a little bit more constructive than that, you know. So I don't know. Over to yourself.
Ryan, I know your wife critiqued your presentation. What slide will you bring back to show her this evening?
I mean, again, I suppose to echo those sentiments to a degree. I mean, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, it's almost embarrassing, frankly, that we all sit here and say, yeah, I've got that problem, and I've got that problem, and I've got that problem too. Well, you think we might have done something about it by now, as a group. But it's in some respects, it's quite refreshing and quite encouraging that we're all seeing the same sorts of issues throughout our various organisations. But I think maybe the overriding and overarching issue, concern, thing to be addressed across all of our different organisations is, I mean, it really is embedded in culture, I think. I mean, and that's the part that I suppose that I'll take away, the different ways in which that sort of cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Stickiness, I suppose, can be best addressed. So certainly some new ideas there that I've taken away, and obviously always a good idea to get a good look at the consultancy firm slides, because they're usually very, very expensive. So we'll exactly we'll take a few of those as well. I suggest you do the same.
Yeah. So Carol pitched a challenge to you about the 4 nationalities. Is any reason or are you going to divulge? You'll take a guess.
I'll take a guess. I think it's a bit obvious. I gave away Australia. Any other ones?
I guessed Australia.
Yeah, that's easy for you. The man from Australia.
You told us Australia.
I did. I gave that one away. That was an easy one. Any other ones?
UK.
Yeah.
The very northern bit
yes.
of the UK.
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No Scotland?
Yep. There you go. There's your 4. No Scotland. No. No. So well done. and going through that. No, I think for me, absolutely, kind of having the same sort of problems and challenges that we're all facing. Sometimes you feel quite alone when you're out there with an organisation challenging back all the time about why you want to do things differently. So kind of, the strength in numbers as well. But for me, the most important thing that I heard through each of the presentations was the human element. And it very much came about. And I think I started saying, companies don't have great ideas. It's people do. And innovation, and we use all these great technology, AI, quantum computing, all of these things, but behind that is people. And behind that is creativity. And behind that is collaboration. It's about us being people and humans and solving problems together. We've done it all through history. We just have fancy names for it now. So I think the one thing I take away from here, it's about the people, and it's about the skills we bring together and the enthusiasm that we create to solving problems. So for me, if anything, taking away in innovation, it's us working better as people, solving problems that are actually meaningful into our society and into our customers and into our businesses. And I think if we continue to do that, we'll be on the forefront of innovation.
I continue lectures from now on. I'll be passing it off as my own as if it was original. Beautifully put, Carol. Thank you very much. Rachel.
Yeah, well, kind of following on from the people side of things as well. We were just talking when we were having coffee outside about how resilient you need to be. And I think, if you're looking at problems all the time and trying to find solutions, but I think for the problems, for the failures, there's always an opportunity to do things better the next time, and there's always a solution. And I think, navel gazing and looking at why things went wrong, that's not going to solve anything. So look at how you can turn it to your favour into the future. And I think good leadership and humanity and humility actually really, really helps that. And that's actually what I saw in it. And then my other point as well is we were talking about, Carol and I are 2 women amongst 5, and it's, men, and why there aren't more maybe women innovators, and you were saying even in your observations. And I think it's maybe because they're coming from a technology background, but as we said, technology really didn't come into the discussion here today, so it really is a mindset. So I'm always, and I'm sure you are as well, encouraging, and actually I think we're going to set up our own group, because we came up with the women innovation. So we're going to watch this space. You can join we'll be setting it up on LinkedIn tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And it's nomination.
Frank, no.
Yes.
Frank, did you spot anything that somebody had that you thought that could help, or that's a good insight there?
Unfortunately, I was late. I have to admit that. I only saw the last 2. Only saw the last 2 presentations. About innovations, a lot of things are in common. It's mentioned the culture, the people, and the right structure and the process. So it's all been mentioned in the previous presenters. Just coming from a technology company or from IBM, I just want to add a few more words to that. Is as human, we have ideas, we create a lot of things, but so for the data itself is the most important. So we all say that information era is now, because the more information you have, the more data you have, the better decision you can make. And that era is past now, and now it's about connectivity, how to make those data making sense. Like, for example, the traffic, cars, and at a certain hour, the more peak come in because of festival, because of certain things. So prediction, how do you use the data to predict the future, and then you can make better decision. That's where for the business leaders or investors or innovators, and that's where you could use the advantage of. So I admit that AI is not going to take over the world, but AI going to help us do many things. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Brian.
I may be very cheeky and go with 2, if that's okay. So one was, there's lots of similarities here, but there's also lots of interesting differences. And I think that's part of it. There's no one way to approach innovation, and you've got to iterate how you innovate just as much as what you're innovating. So, trying different approaches within different organizations will get you different results. And I think that's something you need to be aware of in this. The other thing that I picked up from a few of the speakers was just that challenge with engaging internally within organizations to bring people along with you. And that's certainly something that we've experienced. Just a couple of months ago, we had a new COO start in one of the organizations we're working with, and when we went to meet them, the first statement out of their mouth was, "We don't work with startups." We're like, "But we've been working on this for 6 months." So you've got to find new ways of bringing other people around to what that is. He's now working with 2 startups, interestingly. So it has worked over time, but it's those kind of things happen in organizations, and you have to find ways to keep people engaged and influenced the entire time.
I think the thing that struck me just from listening to the speakers was just the word creativity, and I think we in the way we framed innovation, certainly in Irish Life, we probably don't use that word that much, and yet it came up quite a lot. So I definitely learned something there, and we talk about ideation a lot, but creativity is actually a really powerful word, because if you think about traditional jobs, you went to work, you did your job, and unless it was a creative job, then you went home and you might do something creative to blow off steam, to do something different. The idea that you can be creative in work, in a business context, it's so powerful, and it's certainly something that I'll use again, just in terms of, because it speaks to people, the idea that you can, it brings more meaning to their jobs. It's really powerful, and it's certainly something that I'll take away today.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know about for me, I get energy from ideas like this, and perhaps it's perhaps it's a symptom of middle age, but for me this is like being at a rock concert, hearing people's ideas about how they navigate this difficult terrain. It's been fantastic. We've had 8 superb speakers, and this is part of a DCU series. As you know, DCU is Industries University, and we like to be clearly aligned to what's going in industry. It's part of a series. So before we get to the farewell and standing ovation, I would like to introduce you to my friend and colleague Pier Angelo, who will just say a little word about the IIDB and .lab, and then we shall say our farewells. Pier Angelo. I think you might have to.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Pierangelo Rosati. I'm the Director of Industry Engagement at the Irish DCU Digital Business. So we launched the Irish DCU Digital Business towards the end of last year. It's a research center focusing on understanding how digital technologies are changing business practices, business models. So the .lab is our research arm, and so what we try to do essentially, a key characteristic of our research approach to research is industry engagement. So it's great to have so many people from industry, both as speakers and as attendees today with us, sharing their experience. So definitely industry engagement is a big characteristic of what we do, and applied research. So as I said, I would like to thank the speakers and the attendees for spending their valuable time with us today. So it's great to have such a big crowd, and our next event is going to be next month. So it's 1 out of 6 that we run every year, and we hope to see you again here very soon. Thanks.